Call the town council meeting of December 10th, 2024 to order. Jen, will you take roll?
Councilmember Abarish. Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Gold.
Here.
Councilmember Wall. Mayor Domkowski.
Here. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, and Councilmember Wall, will you lead us? Good. Okay. I just wanted to mention that we were in closed session from 6:15 to 7 o'clock, and we've got nothing to report out. We do have a special guest here, Supervisor Ray Mueller. So if the council's okay, I thought we would just abridge the agenda for a moment to hear what he has to say.
I appreciate it, and I apologize for not being here earlier. But I just wanted to take a moment this evening, and first, I wanted to congratulate former Mayor Wall on a wonderful year. I have a commendation from the Board of Supervisors for you, and appreciate so much. The year that you're mayor is an incredibly tough year. I'm not sure people understand the demands, that increased demands on you during that time period, and to have to go through that with all the things happening, including just a little thing called a housing element. It's an interesting time period. So thank you for your service to the county, and I have this for you.
Thank you.
And then I understand I missed I missed Ned, which is unfortunate. I have a resolution from the Board of Supervisors, and even though he's not here, I just want to say how much he was valued. I know here in Woodside, but also regionally throughout his work on regional committees, was very well respected, a very high level of professionalism, really reflected very well on the city and on the town, excuse me. And he will be missed incredibly, as I know you miss him here. And then Chris, former council member Shaw, former Mayor Shaw. Yeah, I have enjoyed working with you so much. And you've served the city incredibly well. Your insights on what's happening, the problem solving that you do behind the scenes, and the work that you do with Kevin and staff to bring really good solutions, very practical solutions. You will be missed very much as well. And I have a resolution for you from the Board of Supervisors honoring you on this occasion. So, and 9 years. Yeah. There you go. You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. And I'll leave this with the clerk for Ned, and welcome. I'm looking forward to working with you, Councilmember Abish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Mueller. Appreciate your taking the time tonight to really drive home the point, how wonderful the service has been from those individuals. Thank you. Okay, we're going to open public comment. This is general public comment, so persons wishing to address the council on any matter not on the posted agenda are invited to do so. Please note, however, that the council is not able to undertake extended discussions or to act on any non-agendized items. Such items can be referred to staff for appropriate action, which may include placement on a future agenda. And this, of course, limited to 5 persons, 3 minutes each. Anyone over that, we'll just hear you at the end of regular business. Is there anybody that would like to make a comment in the room or the Zoom room on an item not on the agenda? Okay, we will close public comment then. Moving on, we have a brief town manager report. Kevin?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the only thing I wanted to mention tonight, I'm going to presume that people have kind of been seeing in the news that there's been some turbulence at the sheriff's office, so I'll say, and I just want to let people know that I've been in contact with both our local captain as well as talking to the deputies who are assigned to us here in Woodside, and our service continues as normal. They're here, they're responding. We still have the full force of the sheriff's department should it be needed. So I just wanted to take a moment to reassure the council, the public, that we're still well taken care of in that regard.
That's great. Any questions for staff? Comments from public? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you, Kevin. Appointments, we have an appointment to the Circulation Committee, Axel Clavier, Councilmember Wall, or Mayor Pro Tem Gold. Who's got it? Councilmember Wall.
So we have, let me get to the right place, an application for the Circulation Committee from Axel Clavier, who is interested in serving in the Circulation Committee to get more involved in the community and offer some public service. He comes recommended by a number of residents. I'm supportive, and I'll look over to my co-committee member, Councilmember Gold, who's also supportive. So we would put forth our support to appoint Axel Clavier to the Circulation Committee.
Okay, is there any public comment on Axel? Any deliberation on council?
I'll make a motion
Motion would be welcome.
to appoint Axel Clavier to the Circulation Committee. Second that?
Councilmember Alberish,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Gold, Councilmember Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Domkowski.
Yes. Axel, welcome to the Circulation Committee, and thank you for your passion for local government. We'll look forward to working with you. Next up, we've got the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine and will be approved by one roll call motion unless a request is made at the beginning of the meeting that an item be withdrawn or transferred to the regular agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that the council would like to pull for further discussion? Hearing none, I'm going to pull number 7. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak on any of the consent agenda items? Okay, can I get a motion on 1 through 6?
So moved.
Second that?
Councilmember Alberish,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Gold,
Yes.
Councilmember Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Domkowski.
Yes. I'm pulling number 7. That's the volunteer handbook. I know we've got a lot on the agenda tonight, so that of course doesn't mean we can't take the time to acknowledge some really wonderful work that was done by our volunteerism committee to streamline the volunteer handbook. And I want to acknowledge the members of that committee for their diligent work. Tom Johnson, Thalia Lubin, Sandra Danubilo, sorry about that. I apologize. That's a hard one for me. And particularly the committee's chair, Moira Lyon, as well as staff liaison Melissa Cardinale, who is not with us tonight. But thank you. There was a real thoughtful and extensive redlining process that went by, asking a lot of foundational questions about how we do what we do and how to do some things better. And they've really put a really approachable document together that really sets the expectations and the rules and regulations around what it means to be a volunteer with the town of Woodside. So thank you all for your efforts. 3 months, 18 months. I think you've been at it for a long time. But I do understand that there is one suggested change. So I'm going to hand this off to you, Kevin.
Yes, staff would recommend in adopting the volunteer handbook tonight, there is one sentence that we meant to strike in the draft but did not due to a recent change here at the town. It's at the top of page 5. There's a sentence that says neither the mayor nor the other members of the council are paid. That sentence is no longer accurate. So we ask that you, in adopting this document, direct that we make that change.
Okay. Can we get a motion to adopt item 7 with the suggested change before we approve it? Seconded. Or a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve consent calendar item number 7 with the suggested change.
Thank you. Seconded. Very good.
Councilmember Alberish,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Gold,
Yes.
Councilmember Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Domkowski.
Yes. Okay. We did that as fast as we could. It is now 7:15. I want to set the expectations that this could potentially be a long night. We've attempted to mitigate that the best we could. We held our ceremonial change out of all the seats and the reorganization of council early, as well as a closed session, so that we could get right to item A right out of the gates. This is a continuation from October 22nd. In that continuation, public comment was not officially closed, so we're going to be reopening public comment after we hear an update from the town manager on a number of follow-up issues that council wanted to hear more about. And so we'll reopen public comment after we hear from town manager Brian. And maybe it's going all the way over to Sage. Ricochet, it's you, Brendan.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members. So yes, as you noted, this project was reviewed on October 22nd. It was continued for direction to the applicant and staff for specific items. Given the length of this meeting and the need for all the public comment, we'll just briefly go through the items that were asked for by council with the remaining of the details in the staff report. The council asked for 5 items. One was to clarify the details of all proposed parking expansion screening, such as the details for fencing, design heights, and the details of the proposed landscaping. The council also asked for to clarify if additional landscape medians could be located within the parking lot and if additional landscaping could be provided within the existing parking lot layout. So also looked to to the applicant to provide current parking needs analysis for all existing businesses at Kenyatta Corners. Also, it was asked of staff to provide the current seat count for Bucks in the Village Bakery, including both indoor and outdoor areas. Lastly, the council asked for staff to compare the parking requirements for this proposed project with parking requirements for other cities. So how this project would fare in terms of number of parking spaces required in other jurisdictions. And then the last item was just an ask for staff to just reorganize the conditions of approval. So there was no direction to change any of the conditions that were recommended at the last meeting. So no language has been changed, but there is just some reorganization that was done just to group them better by topics to help facilitate any discussions regarding conditions of approval at this meeting. The applicant has suggested some project changes. They'll probably speak to that tonight, but all this is outlined in the staff report. We're happy to answer any questions, but just in terms of trying to stay brief, concludes my report.
Thank you, Sage. Any questions for staff from the council? Councilmember Wall. I got to get used to that. It's Councilmember Wall.
Yes. So kind of take through my questions. So maybe this is a question for Sage, but perhaps might need some input from Jean as well. Could you describe, just kind of in plain language, how enforcement works? So for example, if a aspect of the conditional use permit is violated, let's say a delivery occurs outside of the approved delivery hours, how would a resident go about asking for enforcement?
They would look to the town. The town would inform the applicant, the property owner, should I say, of the violation of the conditional use permit and seek compliance with that condition. Should it continually occur, the tool in the municipal code would be to bring it to the planning commission for a revocation of the CUP or some adjustment to the CUP being out of compliance.
Okay. Because there's been some activities recently where deliveries have occurred outside of the delivery hours. And in my impression of having been CC'd on some of those emails, it was really unclear how to seek enforcement and rectify that. So would it be a resident's, their first stop would be to come to the town, or would it be to go to the property owner?
People are always encouraged to talk to their neighbors, including property owners of commercial businesses. So that is one way they could seek out just direct action from the property owner. If they wanted the town to be involved or to initiate that action, they could come straight to the town. I will note that they're currently under the current CUP, there is no condition about delivery hours. So there was nothing to act upon with these current complaints that came in. The condition about delivery hours is something that we've added as a recommendation for this conditional use permit update. So, given that the property was very responsive, quickly on all of those, emails, there was no reason for the town to be involved at that time.
Okay, quick follow-up question on that. Did staff consider implementing any sort of penalty mechanism so that there would be a fine associated with a delivery, for example, that occurred outside of the delivery hours?
Yes, good evening. There is nothing currently in your municipal code to allow for administrative fining. Many cities have a process of that nature, but even in those cities where those administrative penalties exist by way of ordinance, you would be required to hold a hearing to determine whether or not there was evidence to support the violation. So it would be a call-up, just as Sage is talking about in regard to any other violation which could exist now.
Okay, so just, I don't,
Can I speak to that for a second? Because I specifically talked to both the ownership of Bucks and the Village Bakery on this very, very subject. And they communicated directly to me, both of them in writing, that their policy is and will be 6 o'clock, absolute earliest in the morning. And if you don't, if a vendor violates that, they will be terminated as a vendor by both organizations. Have that in writing if I want to copy that.
so I just want to make sure I understood. So the process would be, so somebody wanted to complain about a violation, they would talk to the town. Okay.
Correct.
And is there a specific person, or like who would they be expected to reach out to?
For CUPs, they can reach out to the planning department or the code enforcement officer. Those would probably be the best two direct ways to communicate to the town.
Okay, and then what would happen next?
Then we would have to investigate the claim. And so if if the person making the inquiry had any evidence, that would be helpful for the town. But the first note would be to reach out to the property owner, given that the delivery has already occurred. And we would need to inform the applicant of that and indicate that they should not allow that to happen again.
Okay, and then if it continued to happen, what would happen next?
Then it would be up to the town to bring the CUP to the planning commission to look at worst case scenario, or maybe you should say most detailed review would be to look at possible revocation of the conditional use permit.
And so there's no like interim measure that could be taken. It seems like pretty drastic to go from somebody complaining to having to bring it to the planning commission.
When it would come to the planning commission, it could be for a revocation or an amendment of the conditional use permit.
And so that amendment could look like what exactly?
That amendment could look like changing the hours of the delivery, changing the locations the deliveries could be made to, if that's the specific violation we're talking
All right, anybody else want to go with any questions?
Yeah,
Pro tem.
I wanted to follow up on what Councilmember Wall was talking about with enforcement, because it's a big issue for me personally, and I think it's a big issue for a lot of our constituents here. So there's a difference between the tenants and the permit holder. Permit holder is the property owner. So we have a lot of people pointing fingers at each other. So it's sort of like I think that we've had citizens complain, and the town says, talk to the tenant, and the tenant says, talk to the property owner, and the property owner says, I can't do anything about it. And I think it's been horribly unsatisfying and frustrating for our citizens. And so I just think that, I'm not trying to deliberate here, but I think that this is as clear as mud. And we have to do better than that. I think that there needs to be a way that when somebody violates something, whether it's the number of seats in the restaurant or the noise issue, or they're making deliveries, that somebody from the town staff should go out there and say, stop it. And we need to have some enforcement mechanisms. I'm going to propose some because as I think some of you may know, it's difficult for me to get past the conditional use permit without some explicit enforcement issues on there. And that's a big issue for me personally. I did have a question I wanted to ask Planning Director. Could you review what your findings were on two of the questions that came up? I think this would be a good time to do that. Number 5 and number 4. 5 was the parking requirements compared to other cities. If you could just, you don't have to go through them individually, but just what did you find? Are we sort of like, do we demand more parking than our colleagues in other cities or less, or are we on par? And then the other part of my question is what did you find on seating counts and how does that compare to the conditional use permit?
So, in looking at the cities that we compared this project to, Woodside is the higher end of the spectrum in terms of number of spaces required. And, you know, it's always important to kind of look at different factors. On one, you know, there's just implemented codes, but also maybe why those are different in some cities, whereas a place like Redwood City might have a lot more on-street parking, public transportation, parking garages, things of that nature, which may afford them to have lower parking requirements than Woodside. But Woodside is at the higher end of the spectrum. With regard to your second question, was about the seating counts. So yes, after last meeting, town staff went down there and counted seats before the parklets were removed and found both of the businesses to be out of compliance. And as it relates to the current CUP, we have an application before us with a project proposal. So there's a proposed number of seats that are required, and therefore there is a certain number of parking spaces required by the municipal code to accommodate that number of seats, along with the other uses in the center. So what we're looking at today is, does this particular application comply with the municipal code? And if so, the council looks at any findings for the entitlements to see if they can be made to approve the project.
So I'm looking for more specificity than that. So compared to today's conditional use permit as it exists today, we have not approved the proposed conditional use permit application. So where we stand today, can you just review where we are with the number of seats in each of the establishments
Sure.
compared to the permit?
Yeah, so both of the seats, both of the businesses were exceeding the seat count. Now that was with the temporary parklets, in which that temporary CUP has expired. The property owner decided to remove those in an effort to kind of curb compliance or to come into compliance. You have more places to put seats, you're likely going to have more seats. And so with that moving forward, if this application is not approved, any complaints received, town staff would need to go out there, take seat counts, and look at the process just described for the other violations.
So 2 follow-ups to that, I'm still looking for specificity. What was your count?
Sorry.
And what was the permit number?
Thank you. Sorry about that. So Bucks had a total of 189 seats, and they're currently allowed 120. And the bakery had a total of 200 seats. And during the day, they're allowed 70 seats, and that is when these counts were taken.
95 at night.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I've been asking that question for 2 years. Thank you. I appreciate the response.
Paul, I have a question on seats. If well, I don't want to interrupt.
No, please, I'm thinking.
Okay. So I understand there was a planning commission years ago that looked at this topic, and there was a suggestion that I don't know the history here, but for whatever reason didn't happen or didn't get incorporated into the municipal code. But the suggestion was, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to count seats. Like nobody really cares about seats. It's patrons. And there's, software readily available to indicate how many people have actually visited the establishment. So can you help me understand why we're still talking about seats and haven't moved to talking about people?
Um, the current application, so if you're just allowed a total number of seats or guests, patrons, I think it's important to stick with seats, given that, you know, if a business has more seats, they are likely to fill them. Now, whereas I think the discussion that may have come up in the past was regarding when you have this fluctuation in the number of seats or patrons that can occupy the space during different hours. And so when, you know, you're allowed 70 in the day and 95 at night, you know, should the expectation be that you remove 25 seats during the day, or just allow them to remain, and therefore, you know, looking at the actual number of guests is the more important kind of quantifiable thing to look at. So, but if we're just going to a total number of seats, to suggest that a business should be allowed to have 20 more seats than patrons they're allowed just creates a further complication in enforcement. You're providing the ability for a business to violate the number of patrons that are allowed, whereas if they just can't have more than a total number of seats, that potential is definitely minimized at least.
Okay, can kind of see that logic. I also think I'm not totally bought into that logic. I think, you know, whether a business wants to have a few extra seats lying around for whatever reason, you know, I'm not a restaurant owner, so I couldn't say, but I mean, if we wanted to adjust the language here to apply to patrons rather than seats, would we be able to do that?
You could do that. It could open up the door. If there's no limit on number of seats, they could put as many seats out as they like. And then and going out there to count people whenever we get a complaint, with no mechanism to tell them to remove those chairs.
We could require them to have software that would indicate how many patrons have been sat.
Correct. We just can't stop them from actually seating people that are waiting for seats at the time.
Well, we can, because we could then enforce the patron limits that would be in the CUP. Okay.
Back to you.
Thank you. I remember where I was. I just wanted to make sure, sorry to keep harping on this
That's all
issue. It's
right.
obviously a big one. So the counts were 189 for Bucks and 200 for the bakery.
That's correct.
But that was before the parklets were removed.
That's correct.
So I think that Bucks, by removing the parklets, is now in complete compliance. In fact, they appear to be one under their permit. With the 60 removed, I think the bakery is still in excess of the permitted number that they have, of even the higher number of 95. They're actually even over the 117 that's proposed. So, but the parklets have now been removed. We got a lot of emails over the past couple of weeks that telling us that outdoor dining is the greatest thing that's ever happened in Woodside in the last 2 decades. I get it. We didn't order the removal of those parklets.
That's correct. That was a decision purely made by the property owner. As we've discussed in the past, given the processing of this application, there hasn't been a directive to go after removal of the seats. And so that was just a decision made by the property owner.
I bring that up because I don't remember any actions that the council took.
That's
don't
correct.
even
Town staff did
council
not
members being-
provide any direction.
We had nothing to do with that.
That was their choice on their own.
Thank you. Just wanted to make the point. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
I guess the other question I had regarding seating outside, do we also include the, I'll call it the walkway in front of the bakery and Bucks where there are,
So there's
Number of seats.
currently, under the current CUP or even the proposed CUP, there is no proposed seating along that walkway. So it's just not part of the application. If the owner were to provide that as part of the application, the main thing that we would need to check with the building department to make sure there's enough width left on that walkway per building or ADA codes.
thank you.
All right, yeah, sorry, I do have a couple more questions. So on the topic of the trail, and maybe for the benefit of the public that are here tonight, can you just describe again in like plain language, what the staff is proposing the applicant do vis-a-vis the trail that runs from Kenyatta Road by Woody the Fish? And in particular, there was a letter from a resident that resonated with me that her read of the trail was that children or anybody really on the trail wouldn't be visible when they were traversing the trail because of the way the fence would be positioned. So when you're describing what's being proposed by staff in the packet regarding the trail, if you could cover that aspect as well.
Sure. So throughout the hearing process is where the recommended conditions were developed. There was a lot of concerns about the singular or multi-use portion of the trail or allowance for different uses or singular use. So it was acknowledged that the current informal trail that's primarily used in the back part of the property is not within an easement. The portion along the creek is located within an easement, although that is only dedicated for equestrian use. So it was acknowledged that it's not currently only used by equestrians, and the importance, the need to accommodate bicyclists and pedestrians, primarily for kids going to and from school or the town center, but for all residents of Woodside. And so also as part of that, there was Trails Committee that recommended not having a multi-use trail. They were looking to avoid any potential conflicts with equestrians and other modes of transportation. At that time, the owner looked at and with the encouragement of circulation and the Trails Committee to make improvements to the perimeter trails, and then looking at modifying the open space easement, now move the equestrian easement and make it a multi-use easement along with constructing that trail. And so that's the recommended conditions of approval at this time.
Okay, sorry, I totally didn't fully grasp it here. So I'll repeat back what I heard and tell me if I'm right. So you're saying that the trail will be moved. It'll become a multi-use trail. And who's going to pay for those changes?
Under the recommendations and the proposals early on by the applicant, that was to be constructed by the applicant. The condition still reads for them to include that as part of their construction permits.
Okay, and then will the fence that's proposed obscure the view of people traveling on that trail?
It's a very good question. I think that's part of the reason, and we noted it at the last meeting, that really keeping that solid fence to 4 feet. We also talked about the wire mesh Corten fence. So keeping that open so that helps to increase visibility while keeping that solid fence lower, because there was some talk about bringing it up to 6 feet. And that was a concern raised by staff. It does reduce visibility, not just for conflicts of different modes of transportation, but also just for safety.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
Have you looked into,
Member? I'll go for it.
have you looked into how much light, how effective it would be to have a 4-foot solid? Would it be effective in blocking lights that are shining into people's living rooms?
I think it would partially be effective. Really depends on the height of the vehicle. And that's why the recommended conditions of approval not only look to install the fence, because that's one nice solid barrier, especially for shorter vehicles. It could really do a lot to minimize light visibility. But with the addition of landscaping that can go trawler, be semi-transparent for the safety issues just recently mentioned, having those two things in combination would provide better light protection for the neighbors. But a tall truck, the 4-foot fence may not be as effective.
And for the width of the trail, the multi-use trail, is there any way to ensure that it would be at least 8 feet consistently throughout? Is there some mechanism to ensure that would?
In terms of 8 feet wide, sure, I think that's a possibility. The trail is 15. The easement itself is 15 feet wide, and so the trail treads usually, you know, the equestrians in the room probably can correct me, but I think usually around maybe the 2 to 4 foot range typically. But, you know, when you construct a trail, you know, whether it's used compact DG or gravel or similar type, you know, within that 15-foot easement, there's the flexibility to make it wider for sure.
But what's currently being proposed?
We don't have the details of the construction. That's something I think coming out of what's, you know, there was a question of equestrian only, peds and equestrians. Now with bicycles and equestrians, you know, we'd be looking to town engineer, public works, any advice they may have on providing appropriate widths to accommodate as many uses as possible.
So we would need to specify that at this point.
Could. I haven't studied that.
If we don't specify it, could the property owner build the narrowest multi-use trail possible?
Yeah, I mean, we could beef up the condition a little bit more to specify that. Want to be most clear. I think, yeah, I mean, with any trail being constructed, I think it's always looked at the use and what's necessary for those particular locations.
Any other questions from council? Okay, I've got 3 quick follow-ups to what was asked. The first one is normally the applicant would develop the trail and the town would maintain it. But if we felt that the trail was of high public value, could the town both develop and maintain and also build out trails B and C, B for multi-use and C as a new equestrian trail? We could do that.
The town can choose to pay for the trails, yes.
Yeah.
And then with regard to the 2 trails, it's just important to note that they will converge into one trail.
It'd be, yeah, trail merging signs or
And-
something. I mean,
Right, and so that just sometimes becomes a little bit more. That's why we talked about the signage in the report.
mhm.
Just if you're going to do that, you want to try to be as directive as you can to the different modes of transportation. And then, you know, something that was raised through the committee reviews, doing multiple trails in that area was frowned upon, just given that it would require more development of that area. So where the existing equestrian easement is now, it's immediately adjacent to roughly the northern property line, which is right up against a neighbor. So if we installed a trail at that location, it would require more tree removal and probably have a more significant impact on that northern neighbor. So having a singular trail reduces the amount of disturbance necessary, minimizes any confusion, and can also pull that further away from the northern neighbor. So that's what the staff was looking at.
I only asked because last time we've got some feedback that it would be very difficult as a multi-use single trail. And we could engage our own trails committee and our own landscaping committee to do it right and to rebuild landscaping, if you will, that gets removed in the process.
That's correct.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question on that? So, but procedurally, in order to ensure that we would have the right to do that, I imagine we would need property owner consent to allow the town to build that trail. Would we need to incorporate it into the CUP? Say the property owner will allow the town to fund and design, these trails at a future point?
It would be the terms of the easement. So it's this, this condition, what is it, 611, 6A11. This is the one where this is for all the documents that are necessary. So the applicant, when we were going through the review process, didn't want to go through the process doing all the technical legal descriptions and all of those documents until they knew that the actual concept was going to be accepted by the town. If this project is approved, the actions for actually accepting these modifications as depicted on the plans will have to come back to council, and those could be clearly written into that.
Okay. One question on the parking analysis. What's on the agenda tonight is the project that's, just so everybody's clear, it's as proposed based on the municipal code that's in place today. And if we're interested as a council, we can give direction to staff to bring that back in the first quarter to look at these so-called restrictive parking ratios. And at that time, if the applicant wants to come back and make a final CUP, that's when that would happen.
That's correct. If the town changes the code and the project's not built yet, they could come in for some type of revision to the CUP. Or even if the project is built and they wanted to make some modifications under the new regulations, they could apply for that.
Okay. And then just one last one back at this question of seats versus customers. If we want to change, if we want to do the red line strike to customers, your suggestion is that we at least do an overlay that says some boundary of not allowing more seats, than 20% more seats than the CUP customer line or whatever, something that ties it into the fact that there aren't going to be 200 seats if we approve 100 customers.
I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, okay. Yes, Jen.
I have another question. So maybe following up on Hassan's question around the fence, Sage, you mentioned that that some screening could be put in place to further shield the neighbors from lights from cars. But my read of the proposed CUP is that that's not currently in there, that there's no screening requirements for, I mean, with plants. I know that there's a fence, but there's nothing in the proposed CUP that would require plantings along the western side. Am I reading that correctly?
I'm quickly, my recollection is we're at 6A8. So it's page 18 of the resolution, page 33 of item A.
Sorry,
6A8.
one that starts with a comprehensive outdoor lighting plan?
Correct. It mixes the lighting, fencing, and planting.
That's just during construction, right? Is
No,
that
so
the-
this is prior to issuance of a building permit that they're modifying their plans to include all of these things.
Sorry, just give me a minute to read.
No problem. There's a lot in there.
Okay, so your read is that screening, like permanent plantings are required on the west. I guess
Correct.
I was confused because I would have thought that would have been in the landscaping, so somewhere between P and Q. But
So, yeah, P talks about installing and maintaining the landscaping shown on the approved plans. So the plans in which, if they are approved, that are submitted, includes, the planting that we went through at the last meeting with the different trees and shrubs. And so their construction plans would need to include that as well. And then therefore that gets installed, and then P says to maintain that.
okay, thank you for clearing that up for me.
Okay, all right. Go ahead, council member. Yes.
So given the large response we got from the removal of the outdoor seating, is there anything that we could do this evening or, plan for the future to just address that issue regardless of the outcome of what's before us?
It's a good question. So doing the outdoor parklets themselves creates more space. If we're going back to kind of seats versus people, they might put out more seats there, and whether they're not all occupied, that could be something. I should say the outdoor dining in and of itself does require an amendment to the CUP. And so they would, if there was some reduced application that just says, hey, we're just doing the parklets, but we're not increasing the number of patrons allowed, therefore no more parking may be required, that could be a different application. They have been removed. There was, there's this condition R about, 1R about, it's interim measures, and, we're looking at, during construction, maybe they do some parking management that allows them to keep the more seats in the parklets. But in this instance, the owner just decided to remove the parklet. So it's really up to the owner to apply for something for staff review.
Okay. With that, we're going to open public comment. As I mentioned earlier, this is a continuation of the October 22nd meeting. During that meeting, just so everybody knows, we held 71 minutes of public comment. We've also received 128 emails since that time, 117 have been for the project, or 92%, just so everyone is aware. You're all welcome to speak. You can even reiterate your remarks from the last session if you wish, but I want to emphasize that we have heard everyone's initial remarks, and we have taken them very seriously. Even Councilmember Abarish was present for the entire evening and listened in at that time. So you're also free, if you'd like, to summarize remarks or agree or disagree with the prior speaker, or to simply comment on the new information that's been brought forth from staff this evening. At the end of the day, of course, it's your 3 minutes. And with that, let me also just emphasize that this is our second bite at the apple tonight. So we're going to hold everybody strictly to 3 minutes, and there will be no repeats, no second times at the mic, one time only. So with that, welcome. And please, when you approach the mic, yes, Kevin?
Oh, I would suggest, we're not planning to do this, to let the applicant address you first.
Okay, all right, yeah. Is that going to be in,
I mean,
Is that you, Dave?
assuming that they,
Mr. Tanner? Okay,
I'm Dave Tanner, the applicant for this little fiasco. Oop, sorry. All right, I should have known that. I'm Dave Tanner, and I'm the applicant for this little fiasco. So I to the design on it.
Dave, I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt. I'm also going to allow Lee Prince on as a, I'm just going to
Right.
promote
Lee-
her as well.
Lee will also have to talk.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yes. Anyway, you had a lot of questions about occupancy. One of the key points of occupancy is also from the fire department. They don't care how many chairs are there. All they care really about is how many people they're going to allow in that space at one time. That is one part that, and that occupancy number is mounted to a wall in both restaurants in some locations. So it's, they know, they can look up and see that. So the fire department literally is in control of how many people can be inside that building at any time. They don't care how many seats you guys say. They say the occupancy is this, that's it. You can't go past this. That's helps clear that up a little bit for you.
Yep, no, very clear, understood.
Yeah. There's any other questions you might have? I mean, I've sat here and listened to everything and I had an answer for it all, but I'm getting old and can't remember everything. So if you have any questions, want something cleared up, I mean, I'm here to answer it for you. If you have any other questions?
I have,
yeah, go, of course.
so I guess from the applicant's point of view, are you on board with the recommendations of staff in the packet? Or is there anything that you would take issue with?
No, we're not on board with all the stuff the staff put in there.
You
Just to
wanna-
let you know, all right? Yeah. So we sent you letters. I don't know if you've received them or not, but they should be in your packet on what we propose to do. The project is increasing at a rapid rate for what everybody wants. And there's a certain point of is what we can do and what we can't do. All right. This is not recoverable money for the landlord at this time. You can't walk up and tell everybody, okay, we're going to do a parking lot. All your rents are doubled. Doesn't work that way. So the Roberts family was asked to look at doing the parklets. They passed, a measure for it, and they're trying to comply with that. And I don't know what else to say, but we're trying hard. That there's a certain point of if you keep adding to the cost, it becomes to a point that no, there's not enough money to pay for it. So, and it's going to be difficult to do this project and keep the shopping center open at the same time. This is really one of those very difficult projects to do. So all the trucks that have to come and go from there to do all the digging, all the prepping and everything, it'll be a very difficult project to accomplish as is. So, all right. Any other questions?
I think we're going to go to Ms. Prince.
Good.
Thank you,
All right.
Mr. Tanner.
And I think Lee has something to say too.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Good evening, council.
Yes.
In no particular order, I'm going to try and go through and respond to some of the questions I heard you all raise this evening. So first, I think Sage made a good point about Woodside requiring more spaces than other communities and you being focused with this project application on requiring compliance for the center with your municipal code and not others. I think this center in particular is unique, and this community is unique, and it deals with things like bike and ride issues with folks coming to town to recreate. And I think those are things that are important to consider as you deliberate, and are issues we raised in the recent letter that we submitted for this council meeting. Also just want to discuss briefly why the property owner decided to remove the parklets. At the last several hearings we've had about this project, we've heard a lot of comments from the community about the number of seats and enforcement, and it was really making that the focus of the hearing as opposed to the project itself. And the property owner really wanted to take that issue off the table so that you all could focus on the proposal for outdoor dining and for additional parking. These are the things that are allowed in the municipal code with the CUP amendment that's proposed for you this evening. And so that's what we really wanted you to focus on, not whether someone was overseating or not. I also want to briefly touch on the idea of software and seats versus patrons. I think we have talked a lot about the fact that enforcement has been difficult, and I think it would be easier for the town as well as the property owner if there are complaints to be able to physically address seats as opposed to requiring compliance with some sort of software program. Relative to the trail, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about what's necessary. I think as Dave mentioned, you know, this project has seen additional things asked of it far beyond what was expected for the parklets and the parking that's anticipated by the measure approved by the voters. If you look at the current equestrian easement that was required when in 1980 when the CUP was approved, it actually requires the town to both construct and maintain the easement. So it's not unprecedented for the town to do so. And given the significant cost burden that this project is bearing at this point, you know, the letter that we sent to the town before this was an effort to sort of simplify the project down to its core issues of providing the parklets and compliant parking with the municipal code. The other piece I want to touch on was the screening that was mentioned. Based on the discussion at the last council meeting, we felt like it was understood that planting wasn't as effective screening, both because it takes a long time for plants to grow and then sometimes plants dies. And so really we're just focused on the most effective screening for the neighbors, for the community. And that was that 4-foot fence, which is why we had requested that the plantings be pulled out of the conditional use permit. And just to reference, there should be our letter in the packet, which details the things that we disagreed with that are currently in the staff report. And then, you know, I will say that if the CUP amendment doesn't get approved, the parklets were not in compliance with the existing CUP, given that the COVID restrictions are, you know, or the COVID allowances are no longer there. And so if this isn't approved, the outdoor dining does go away. And without the additional parking, there really isn't an incentive for the council or for the property owner to do the project. And as I'll just note, 92% of the emails you received were positive, which is a shift from the focus on all the negative. And I think it's important to recognize that sends a strong message that this is something that the community really does want to see approved. So with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions you might have or questions that come up as you hear public comment. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Prince. Any questions from council? All right, well, we'll come back to you if we have any, and we will now open public comment to the public. Mr. Pugh.
Hey, whoops, hold on a sec. I'm Don Pugh, town of Woodside, resident for many years. This proposal should really be called the Restaurant Expansion Plan. Do you realize that there are 71 extra seats in this plan? How is that going to help out with our parking problem when we add 71 more seats? Meanwhile, for the town council, for 2 years, you've been failing in your responsibility to enforce the CUP. And I listened to this little chit chat about the CUP enforcement. That's a joke. Come on, you haven't enforced what's there. Are you going to enforce anything in the future? The violation of the CUP has been causing the parking problems, and the excess seating is what's causing it. So if we started obeying the CUP, we wouldn't have a problem, and we didn't have a problem before COVID, and we won't have a problem now. You can, and we should have outdoor dining. That's a great idea, but this has been done can be done within the existing parking. Let us not succumb to the extortion from the applicant and others. It's wrong to state that outdoor dining cannot be done without bulldozing the open space. We can save the open space and we can do outdoor dining. First, bulldozing the open space is against California law. The law requires certain findings to be met, but you can't meet these findings. It's a clear violation of the general plan. You can't get benefit to private property from it. It's against California law. You will lose. The staff has failed to probably correctly create the findings. They seem to be very biased in front of the development side of things, and they rely on the applicant's statement. As a town lawyer, Gene said so nobly last time, rationalizations are what these findings are. Well, that's too kind of a statement. The findings are silly, irrelevant, and frankly, utter bullshit. So if the town does approve the bulldozing in the open space, it will be facing an injunction and a lawsuit. The town will be subject to hundreds of thousands of dollars in expenses and will lose in the end. So let's get back to creating a solution. How can we keep some outdoor dining without bulldozing it? First, let's remember the bakery has some beautiful outdoor dining in the back by the hardware store. So they don't really need a parklet out front. Bucks could have a little outdoor dining in the front. It would take us just a couple of seats. So let us work together to find a solution to create some outdoor dining without bulldozing the open space. So let's kill this entire plan that's up under, and let's get back and finding something reasonable. If the seating limits were enforced, there would not be a parking plaque. And regarding these emails, how many of them are Woodside residents and how many of them were generated by this rather well-organized website that pops out the same email? They had posters all over the place. You realize that over 30% of the signatures that were collected were illegal because they're all tourists outside or not residents. So let us focus in on what's right for the residents of Woodside and not developers and not tourists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brianna Vale, and I worked for 12 years in the center as a hairdresser. So I have witnessed all of these difficulties for 30 years. And I will tell you, when the bakery was divided the way it used to be, where it was an actual bakery and a small, nice, intimate place to dine, we would have issues here and there, but it was doable. What are we going to do if we put a giant parking lot out there, and then when the kids get out of school, how are people going to get to and from anywhere? When people are trying to get to appointments up here, or to come here to do anything, especially residents, but also people coming up for hair appointments, let's say. 30 years ago, they were a half hour late when school got out. What are you going to do when you have a whole bunch of restaurant people running around trying to find parking places? It's just a mess. And as a horse person, it just breaks my heart to see you completely dilute the town. We have a town here. Are we trying to keep a town or are we trying to keep a city? I don't think anybody here that has a good, warm feeling of the town of Woodside wants to see you tear up this beautiful little place that if it is opened up to parking, it's just going to be another ugly parking lot. So as Joni Mitchell said, don't tear up a paradise and put up a parking lot, please.
Thank you, Ms. Vale.
Melinda Stoker.
Why don't we go to the Zoom? Melinda Stoker.
Hi,
Hi.
Melinda Stoker. We've lived in the town for a number of years and we've seen plenty of construction projects that have been extremely disruptive. And we've seen a gigantic increase in traffic. And it all goes through the tiny little intersection, impacting Woodside Road, Kenyatta Road, and Mountain Home. I have yet to hear anything about any traffic studies, and I think this would be an extremely negative impact on everyone coming and going through the town, residents, visitors, and service people alike. Even right now, it is difficult sometimes to get in and out of the parking lot, and traffic is backed up through the intersection. And if you're trying to go from Whiskey Hill and turn left on Woodside Road, you have to sit there for 10 minutes because the traffic flow can go all the way from Haciendas into that little tiny intersection at the four-way stop. If we add additional parking, what is that going to do to the backup? There already is a very significant backup. And as Bree or other residents have mentioned, when school is out, it's impossible to drive that way. Just don't go there, right? During the school hours of commute. So many of us feel that this would only benefit the business owners and would have very little benefit to those who, even we who frequent the bakery and we frequent Bucks, and we do enjoy the outdoor dining. There's plenty of outdoor dining that we can enjoy without expanding the parking lot. And we absolutely must insist on a traffic study because it is not going to be good for everyone coming through the town and everyone who lives in the town.
Thank you, Ms. Stoker.
Thanks.
Mr. Lubin?
Excuse me, Steve Lubin, Palm Circle. I couldn't find the letter I sent before the last meeting in the packet for tonight, and I went to look at, and I resent it with a forward this time, and went on the agenda to the link of desk items, and it was password protected, so nobody but me and you, I think, can see that, which disappoints me quite a bit. But I'm really disappointed the parklets are gone. I think, for a long time, I've been trying I've been on many town center committees, and one of the big goals all along has been trying to get the town a more people-friendly place, and the parklets really did that. Not so much the back of the bakery, but the ones out in the parking lot have been a wonderful kind of change to the feeling of the town, and I'm really disappointed they're gone. I think it's a change from the Roberts family really having the town's best interest at heart. I think it's backwards to try to provide enough parking for an increased amount of use. It's clear that the parking's not working. A lot of the parking that's there now comes from employees at the grocery store, and that's never considered in all these calculations. And the calculations are kind of bogus because they're not considered. If we did, if we looked at the whole town center, we could look at all the parking uses and take that into account. I don't deny that there should be some more parking, but the design of the parking lot should be consistent with the town standards. It shouldn't be 120 feet of solid asphalt with no landscaping from a retaining wall to a solid fence. Solid fence will be a disaster with people backing into it. It'll be really ugly. I've given you, my letter has a design that says it's parallel parking on that last row. It loses a few parking spots, but it keeps the headlights from shining into the neighbors, and it provides another 10 feet for landscape screening, which would be much more appropriate. By the way, the plants suggested last time are completely inappropriate. Some are deciduous, some of them are torches. I think the parking lot should have landscape islands. You need landscape islands to make low parking work. It has to be out at the end of the cars so you can see around it. And having trees in the parking lot would make it much less like a strip mall. And you know, and the lights should be low. The trail, if it's going to be a public trail, which I think it should be designed to ADA standards, which is an 8% slope. I think that could be done by starting it further down the trail parallel to Kenyatta Road, which drops quite a bit, and it would avoid the steep part at the top. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, please. Ms. Coe.
Hi, I'm Vicky Coe. I've lived here for 40 years on Greer Road. I have a simple comment, which is just our community has benefited enormously from the outdoor dining. It has brought a sense of community back that didn't exist. It's turned a ugly kind of soulless town into a wonderful, beautiful place. I realize there are inconveniences. The parking issue is a joke, always has been. This is not new, has nothing to do with outdoor dining. And the other issue about traffic, and I agree, we have a traffic problem. But I sat there one afternoon, 2 afternoons actually, Chris was with me for one of them, counting cars and counting trucks. If you want to get rid of traffic problems, don't allow construction, because that's what causes the problem. You know, or don't let kids get out at the same time from school. I mean, this is not related to the bakery and to Bucks. So I think you will be doing a huge disservice to this community to not approve this plan and do it quickly before Christine just fails. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Coe. Anyone else in the room? Yes, sir.
We have lived in Woodside for 25 years. 3 times a week, we take our walk from our home in Manzanita Way, and we enjoy to see the families, the dogs, the celebration of graduation, and it's just a joyful. We have seen the place before the pandemic. We have seen the place after the pandemic. Woodside becoming to be a gem of the peninsula. To destroy that, it's just nuts, okay? I plead with you to do everything you can to keep the parkland open. Thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna jump to the Zoom room. Ms. Hanson.
Oh, the timer started before I've been unmuted. Hi, thank you for having me. Couple comments. The first is that I would believe that the letters you've received, the majority are in favor of outdoor dining and not of this project. Wanted to assume that's the distinction. And the other point I'd like to make is that Woodside is the town that it is today that we all love because of the passionate efforts of citizens to preserve our open space and our rural character. The conditional use permit enforcement at Kenyatta Corners has not been enforced by the town or the applicant for about 8 years or more. Yet recently, the applicant, Ms. Roberts, not the town, demanded that all the outdoor seating be removed. Why'd she do this? Was this to finally demonstrate compliance, or was it really a tantrum by a petulant heiress to a grocery store chain? Like I said, the town did not make her do.
Kim, let's not have the personal attacks, okay? Just stick to the facts, please.
It's just a question, but I will do my best.
Thank you.
Our future-looking town center plan should include more locations for dining and community building, ones that are less likely to being held hostage by a property owner who will only serve the community interests if she does it her way and first ensures financial gain. What we do know, and we can explain, is that the applicant continues to show no demonstration of provision 4, which says that the abandonment of open space is necessary to avoid a substantial hardship due to involuntary factors. I would say that the current plan is a voluntary play that would result in profit and a substantial cost to the town and taxpayers. We also know that US Census numbers show a 6.4% decline in Woodside's population since 1980, and future low-income housing units will not equal more customers for expensive local restaurants. We also know that while Measure A was passed by voters by 5 votes, the ballot measure described the open space easement burden parcel as residentially zoned and made no mention of the open space designation of this property. We know that California has a history of passing controversial, unlawful, and sometimes unconstitutional ballot measures. And I can give you many examples of this. In fact, many ballot measures that involve land use face significant implementation barriers due to local zoning laws, land use restrictions, and environmental regulations, just like this parcel. At the city level in California, even when ballot measures pass with popular support, these restrictions often make it difficult or impossible to legally implement. And it is the responsibility of our hardworking and much appreciated local Woodside government to protect its citizens from legal financial exposure caused by an applicant's current project, which is what we're talking about today. Courts
Thank
and
you.
legal
Kim,
challenges.
I'm going to have to cut you off at the 3 minutes, but thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Too. Yes, please approach.
Thank you all for having this here and everything. My name is Susan Frankel. I've been a resident here for more than 50 years. My mother, who will be 92 in February, owned Gainsborough Galleries and remember the Stagecoach, the liquor store, the library, that all used to be here so long ago with horses all around and everything. I believe with Vicky Co, we need to have the outdoor dining back. The animals that come in there and stuff like that. It's so important to this community and it needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frankel. Yes, please, Ms. Taub.
Hello, my name is Diane Toby. I'd like to express my concern about the proposed development of Kenyatta Corners open space. My husband and I are longtime residents of Woodside. He's been a resident for 47 years and I've been a resident for 27 years. We are disheartened by the negative impact that this proposed development will have on our town and community life. Framing the issue as a defense of outdoor dining is an attractive veneer for the motivation behind the development of the project. The Village Bakery already has lovely outdoor and indoor dining spaces, which have allowed them to thrive financially since their beginnings. This effort is not about preserving outdoor dining, it's about expanding commercial operations at Kenyatta Corners to maximize profits at the expense of our town's character and community. Over the years, our neighborhood has changed and progress is beneficial if done deliberately and correctly. The general plan for the town of Woodside is designed to protect our close-knit community by serving the needs of the residents. However, increasingly, we find the town becoming a destination spot for out-of-town visitors. Traffic congestion now plagues our streets, making daily life less enjoyable and even challenging. We no longer see friends when we're dining in our town, which was a regular occurrence in earlier years in Woodside. Many of the local people are no longer regular diners due to the pricing models, lack of available reservations, or parking challenges. The Village Pub has adopted a Michelin 3-course menu model that prioritizes profit over fostering a welcome environment for repeat local clientele. Much of the change has been the result of aggressive marketing campaigns focused on customers outside of our community. These campaigns strategically seek online promotion. The bakery is promoted as a top destination for outdoor dining statewide. While I'm thrilled that our restaurants have received top critical acclaim, the proposed expansion only facilitates the congestion and kills the small town nature of our town. These changes illustrate a clear shift away from serving the needs of Woodside residents towards catering to a broader audience. Some of the tactics being used by these restaurants is to produce disingenuous promotional materials that encourage non-residents to attend our town meetings, to send letters into the town council, and we feel this egregious step clearly goes too far. Many residents are silenced, worried that opposing these developments will result in losing access to dining establishments in towns. Others are confused and don't know what is exactly at stake. This is not how a community should function. Our town deserves an open, honest dialogue that prioritizes the needs and voices of residents. That's it, and I urge you to stop the encroachment of our space. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Talby. We'll jump to the Zoom room for Dusty Shaw.
Hey,
Desi?
good evening. My name is Desi
Desi Shaw.
Shaw. Yes, Desi Shaw. I
Hi,
know,
Desi.
crazy. Hi. Welcome and congratulations, Mr. Mayor, on being sworn in. My name is Desi Shaw. I've been a resident of Woodside for 18 years. I'm currently calling in from Canada at my school. And I just wanted to give a younger point of view on the whole outdoor dining and the new possible parking lot. I've lived through Woodside prior to having outdoor dining at the Village Bakery and at Bucks, and I've lived through it after COVID with it. And I have friends who work at Bucks and at the bakery. And I love the outdoor dining, and I love the fact that there's a space for me to go when I'm home and hang out with my friends outside and enjoy a burger. And I've tried many times to get space in the back parking lot behind the Village Bakery and Bucks, and it is so hard to find space back there because everyone's trying to get back there. So I personally think that having more parking back there is going to be amazing. I don't know as much and I'm not as well researched as everyone else in that room, but I definitely know that the plans that the ASRB has approved for the new parking has been very thought out, has had a lot of research go into it, and has a lot of compliance with California laws. And so I'm sure that whatever the plan that they are putting forward is actually going to support our community as a whole and increase our town charm that we really want to protect. Thank you.
Thank you, Desi, and congratulations on St. Andrews. Yes.
Hello. My name is Annette Garcia. Firstly, thank you for your time on all of this. I'm an employee at the Village Bakery. However, just as important, I grew up in the zip code. My family is still here.
Yeah.
And I'm a longtime customer with, along with my family, of the Village Bakery and Bucks. These establishments bring people together for a break from their electronics and busy work lives to sit and enjoy the sunshine and natural beauty of the unique town of Woodside. Outdoor dining is a luxury in many areas. Many local cities continue to provide outdoor dining, and I realize this is a different town since COVID hit in 2020. But for some people, outdoor dining is even more than a luxury. It's the only way they get to dine out and visit with friends and family. At the Village Bakery, we have some guests who are elderly and immune compromised and are they're able to enjoy brunch, lunch, or dinner out with friends, providing them the chance to socialize and have a sense of community, a chance to not feel so isolated. The back patio is covered and enclosed, so I still have people come in, mostly elderly, who say, I can't stay. So, and that's happened in the last 2 weeks. I have a brother who is an example as well, who loves Bucks, loves the Village Bakery, and he's awaiting kidney transplant. Once he receives it, he will be on immunosuppressant drugs for the rest of his life. People like him and our elderly customers who insist on sitting outdoors, even when it's cold. I've had people come in and say, I have to sit outside. I can't sit inside or your back patio. Will be able to dine won't be able to dine at the Village Bakery or Bucks anymore. People such as him and our elderly customers. Please consider including this sometimes unseen demographic in future decisions. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. Yes, sir. Come on up, Mr. McNiven.
Hello. Timer. Thank you. Council members, thank you so much for being here. My name is Rowan McNiven. I'm one of the family members who own Bucks Restaurant. And again, thank you for being here. I know you're not getting paid to do this, is from what I've heard.
Well,
and you do this.
See, we are.
Things
You
have
do this
changed.
because you love the town, and I thank you for that. It's really cool. Let's see. gonna get emotional probably because I love you guys. Look, my parents started Bucks in 1991. That's over 30 years ago. I grew up working at that restaurant, and it's been a huge part of my life. During COVID, my brothers and I took over, and it's been honestly one of the most humbling, coolest things ever. Like coming back to your, I don't even know why I'm crying. This is not, I always cry. Jeez, wow. It's just cool. I have kids who went to the same school I did. And it's cool to be like a steward of this town, having people come to you, eat your food, drink your drinks. And I want to do better. I really do. Now that I'm really integrated with this community, I want to make Bucks better. I want to make our food better. I want to make the atmosphere better. I want to do better. And I want to do it because, again, I love this town. And what would I like to see happen here? Well, the parking has been an issue. I would love to see a little more parking. I would love to see it look beautiful. I would love the outdoor dining to stay. I really would. But it's not about what I want. It's about what the town wants. And I just want to stand behind for whatever the town votes for. I will be super stoked. And thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. McNiven. Anyone else? Yes, Ms. Levinson. A red button.
Red button, much shorter. Okay. Hi, everyone. Julie Levinson. Thank you very much for listening to all of our comments. Really appreciate it. So I live at 8 Cedar Lane. It's right behind Roberts. I actually walk to the subject matter property here, so parking is not an issue for me personally. But I do believe in positive progress. And yeah, I love the charm and rural nature of our town. And I think that's why many of us were attracted to Woodside. We love the horse trails, the large trees, the small population, and they've been a highlight and integral part of my family and many others here. But we also love having these world-class restaurants and retail establishments like Emily Joubert and others. They're amazing. I believe it's critical to ensure that we balance our small town nature with any new development. In this case, I'm against the project at hand because I believe it eliminates too much open space and creates much greater traffic congestion. 34 more parking spaces, if I have the number right. That's a lot. On top of our state mandated housing requirement, which I don't know when that's happening or how many, but I think it will create a massive backup at that stop sign, which again, I live there, people commute, people come from the school, et cetera. It's already horribly busy. At one point, if we continue down this path, we'll ultimately need a traffic light, which would be complete anathema to our small town's character. We didn't choose Woodside. We did choose Woodside, and we didn't choose Menlo Park or Redwood City. People came here to live in a rural, small character town. Well, 92% of the emails were positive. Listening to the discussion tonight, I think that's interesting. Most of the people who I know who voted in favor, or not only voted in favor, but wrote some of those emails, had no idea it was tied to this project. So I think digging underneath that is important. Also, from what I heard tonight, using our tax money to maintain these trails is another consideration. We may even, according to what was said tonight, possibly even pay for the construction of such trails. So I'd like to understand that more. Outdoor dining, amazing. I do think it brings community, as people said. But we have the outdoor dining in the back. And I think, as one gentleman said, I think there could be a way to balance this with just a smaller part in front of Bucks or some sort of balancing act here, because people do like the community of having the open dining. My most important part is to keep the tranquility and charm of this town and balance the open dining together. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Levinson. We got one in the Zoom. All right, Mr. Apple, we're gonna open your mic.
Hi there. I hope you all can hear me. Forgive me for
Yes.
not being there in person. I just want to note for the record that I'm a member of the Planning Commission and I'm here tonight on my own behalf as a citizen of Woodside. I want to when this came before the Planning Commission, I voted against it, and I wanted to restate those objections again tonight for the council. I would say just a couple of things. First, I want to clarify. I think almost all of the folks in town, whether you voted for or against Measure A, people are not opposed to outdoor dining. What we and I am opposed to is the conditional use permit, which frankly lacks a lot of conditions and specificity. That was the objection I gave in my when I voted against this at the Planning Commission. And that's the objection that I'm raising tonight. Specifically, I think it's unclear. Enforcement is either unclear or non-existent. And a lot of that came out in some of the questioning earlier tonight of staff. And the additional seats in the permit are completely unnecessary and frankly codifying previous bad behavior, which I just think is not necessary. I'm not going to go into a lot of other detail about why I think this is bad. I voted for Measure A. I'm personally in favor of adding outdoor dining. I would just say that if the town council is going to approve this, I would urge you strongly to cap the seating capacity where it was when Measure A was passed, not 5 years later, 4 years later, whatever it is. Cap the seats today and see how it goes. Put the parking lot in, see how traffic is. The applicant can always come back and ask for more people on another, for more capacity on a future CUP. There's no reason to add additional seats until we actually have evidence as to what's going on at the spot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Apple. Back in the room, Mr. Talber.
Good evening, Mayor. I'm going to heed your call, which is not to repeat anything that's been said in the last council meeting or in this council meeting. I am a member of the Planning Commission. I'm here on my own. I live at 35 Ranch Road. And I'd just like to say it's amazing how people question the numbers, whether it's Measure A. They question that I only won by 4 votes, even though there was a manual recount. And now I see 92% emails, and everybody questions whether they're out of town or whether they know what the hell they're writing about. The only thing new that I've heard tonight is I've heard a couple of cuss words said. I will encourage you to focus on Lee Prince's comments, which is she simplified the issue to outdoor dining and parking permits. I'm not here to threaten the town. I'm not here to talk about working together as a team. But in heeding your warning, I will talk about something that hasn't been discussed yet. And that is, I got here late flight from New York. And what I want to discuss now that hasn't been discussed yet is I would like to recognize Chris Shaw. I was not here earlier when he stepped down. Chris would like to say that it's always amazing what you can accomplish when you're not willing to take credit for anything. That is a Chris Shaw thing. For those of us lucky enough to have worked with Chris, I would say that it is amazing what you can accomplish with Chris's work ethic, his dedication to problem solving, his love for this community, and his unconditional dedication for making a difference. I met Chris in my neighborhood. My neighborhood had 1 ingress and 1 egress to the neighborhood. Thanks to Chris's work and thanks to Kevin's work, my neighborhood has 3 ingresses and 3 egresses. We lost CAL FIRE water tank, but we fought it. Chris helped us try to get to a compromise. That's how I got to meet Chris Shaw.
So, Mr. Talber, I hate to interrupt because your accolades are very well received.
I got
and they
time,
land
and
well.
you told me to use that
I
time
know, but
however I want
it's
it.
not on the subject matter that we're discussing.
Okay, well, you're eating into my time. Can I finish?
Yes, go for
All
it.
right, thank you. I look at Councilmember Domkowski. Mayor, sorry. I look at Matt Garr, who works in the Planning Commission. I look at Pete Bailey, who served on the school board. I look at myself, who co-led Measure A and now serve on the Planning Commission. And we all do this because we had Chris Shaw as a role model.
Okay.
And I have an immense debt of gratitude to thank Chris Shaw for. In my neighborhood, I'm going to throw a thank you to Chris. At least 200 people in my neighborhood are going to show up. I'm going to invite Kevin, who's about to retire, This is an amazing town. This is new. You didn't hear it before. Like Mr. Apfelt, I'm not here to repeat what was said before, so I hope that satisfies your diet.
Thank you, Mr. Tauber. Okay, let me take one more here and we'll go to the Zoom. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Rick Van Duzer. I think you all have heard me speak before. I represent Mickey Malka and Becky Kleiner, the owners of 155 Prospect Street. I want to talk about two general subjects tonight. One relates specifically to the impact upon Mickey and Becky of this project being approved. I think you know by now that they opposed the project. You know all about our arguments with respect to the open space easement and the abandonment of that easement. But I want to talk about the current state of the applicant's position as opposed to the planning staff's report. First of all, key things. One, all of the privacy screening behind the 4-foot wall has been removed from the applicant's proposal. There is none. They're prepared to do none. The applicant, the staff report specifically provides for some planting, but it's the wrong kind of planting. It doesn't specify planting that adequately will provide screening between the parking lot and the property, and that needs to be dealt with. The other thing that the planning department is requiring, but that the applicant has chosen at this point to refuse to do, is to provide any security in the back of that property. The planning department has recommended gates or some kind of entry mechanism to control entry after hours. The applicant has refused to install it. They've required security patrols after hours. The applicant's refusing to install it. The applicant is refusing to do anything to protect the security of my clients. And hopefully at least the staff report will persuade the council to at least provide that. We've talked about the trail. They've backtracked on the trail. They're no longer willing to pay for the trail. They're no longer willing to put it in. The other thing I want to talk about is that this is not, I think people have said this is not about outdoor dining. I don't think anybody disagrees that outdoor dining is a good thing for this town. Certainly my clients do not. But when you look at the numbers and you consider what's been done to analyze the parking situation, the truth is there hasn't been any real analysis. If you just simply look at the numbers, and I'm going to walk through these because I think it's pretty simple. First of all, the code in this town is requiring 86 parking spots for the retail and office use at Kenyatta Corners. The survey the applicant themselves did provides for 47 for the retail and 5, and I've added 5 for the code compliant office use. So that's 52 as opposed to 86 required spaces. So that's 34 by my count, overcounting of spaces required to service the existing retail establishments at that location. If you take that into account and you look at the 189 number, and you subtract that 34 excess, guess what? You end up with 155 spaces. How many spaces do you have right now? 155. When you use 52 of them to service retail and office, you're left with 103 spaces to service the restaurants. And when you compare that to what's required by the code, it's 105. The maximum of other cities is 105. The average is 82. So there's a way in which both outdoor dining and avoiding this proposed project can be done if the council's willing to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to just jump to the,
Go ahead, Tom.
all right. Steve, Mr. Patrick in the Zoom room, we're going to bring you in and then we'll come right back to Mr. Malcolm.
Well, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Steve Patrick. I am a Woodside resident for actually 67 years. I've seen a lot of change, and I think we need to understand that change is just part of life. And I guess what I'd first like to do is acknowledge Christine Roberts and the Roberts family for putting up with sort of this whole thing. I mean, it's arduous to suggest and do this, and I think they did that because they feel that outdoor dining is appropriate in Woodside, and I think they understand that it's that's what people want here in town. I believe a nice percentage of the open space and conservation easement will be preserved. I was a proponent of Measure A and I voted for it, and I clearly understood that a parking lot would require, the removal of some of the easement, and I think they are removing some of the easement the conservation easement. I think a solid fence is not a good idea. I think landscape screening should be proposed. I know that the applicant feels that it'll die, but I think that would be a more appropriate sort of screening for the neighbors. Um, uh, Regarding the trail easement, I think it's interesting. I was on the planning commission for probably more than 16 years, and we dedicated a lot of trail easements, and the town always maintained them, built them. The easement's dedicated by the property owner, and that's a magnanimous gesture. They aren't required to do so. And in this case, people are diagonally transversing this property just because Christine Roberts and the Roberts family says it was okay. To now put it on them to have to build a 15-foot wide trail to accommodate horses and bikes and skateboards. I mean, it's inappropriate. And if they're willing to dedicate a new trail easement, I think that's a wonderful thing. I'd like to say that, please approve this plan. I don't think it's a perfect plan. I think Steve Lubin has some great ideas, but we are where we are. I've seen a lot of things that aren't my preference happen in town, but it's still a great town and it's going to change. And I think this could be a change for the better, getting a little more parking, getting some outdoor dining, and we'll kind of live and let live. So please support this project and the outdoor dining. I think it's a good move for our town. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. Mr. Malcolm, I think you were on your way to the mic.
Good evening. You all know me by now. I'm the neighbor to this project. 3 things I want to mention. Enforcement. Councilman Wall, you were asking about enforcement. We have been calling on the city for 3 years, complaining on noise ordinance violations. And the response we got consistently is directed to Christine Roberts. And every time we directed to Christine Roberts, she said, directed to Box. I don't know who it is. I don't see the cameras. Call Tyler. He'll tell you what cameras are they. That's not the way enforcement works. There has been 0 enforcement since we have been a resident of Woodside in terms of noise ordinance. On the last 2 weeks, you received 2 emails from me at 5 in the morning when it was violated. And that has happened for the last 3 years since we have lived in that property consistently. And we always get the same answer. People try their best, but that's not enough. So we need enforcement. And if you're gonna enforce noise, you gotta enforce CUP. And if you start to enforce those things, then reconsider what you're doing, because until you don't enforce, there's nothing to be done. It's just not working out. And as a neighbor, it's not working. Second, we attended for the first time all the meetings, Town, Planning Commission, Land Commission, all of this. And there were a lot of recommendations on this project. And to my surprise, as our lawyer said recently, the applicant disregarded every single one of those recommendations. Taking down from 10-foot lights to 5, not gonna do it. Put in screening, not gonna do it. Put security and put chains to protect at night, because you heard my 13-year-old daughter get up here and talk to you about how she had to run at night because there were cars parked in the park, not doing it. So I wanna understand, with all those requests that you and your different people working in these committees have requested, the applicant comes and says, sorry, not gonna happen. And last but not least, just to not keep adding things that have been repeated, Christine Roberts has said on email that she is worried that this will not be able to finance this project anymore. And Mr. Tanner mentioned that today. What are the chances that you approve this and she sells the property in the next few months for a lot more money because there's a whole new permit there? It's clear. It's on the emails. You have an evidence. We shared it with you on our letter from our lawyer today. So our request is very simple. We are not against outdoor dining. You can have outdoor dining and you can maintain the parking the way it is, and you can revisit, because if you have enforcements and you get those restaurants back to the number that have been approved before all of this happened, to 90 people at night, 75, 120, and you measure traffic, they should come back and get their approval for whatever they need to do. But right now, you're measuring the wrong numbers, because they were sitting over 200 people in those places each. Thank you.
you, Mr. Malka. I think we'll jump to the Zoom room for Mark.
Hi, everyone. Mark Dickey here. My wife Pam Roberts and I live at Dean Road and have been longtime residents in Woodside. And rather than repeat a number of the comments I made tonight, we are not in favor of the project. And I think what is most troubling to us is the lack of discipline in terms of both the issuance and enforcement of CUPs. If we're going to have CUPs, it's important that they be thoughtfully licensed, that's the right word, and enforced. And in this case, it's been egregious, disregard for these CUPs, protecting the interests of both the citizens and the town that is most troubling. So my hope is that the current town council and the town itself think through the use of CUPs. If we're going to have them, then enforce them. Make sure they're thoughtfully issued and that people are accountable. And if they are, then I think we'll arrive at the right decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Back into the room. Anyone? Okay, Mr. Middleman.
Good evening. I'm David Middleman, 280 Grandview. I'm a member of the ASRB, speaking as a private citizen. Our household represents 4 votes. And when we read Measure A, we read it as, first, Measure A would allow improvement of residentially zoned properties in town center with a public amphitheater, gazebo, or similar building designed to provide a gathering place for community events, promoting art and culture. That's what I thought I was voting for. And in that development, sure, there'd be more parking. Secondly, it said, well, in order to do that, we have to allow the vacancy of the open space permit. I didn't vote for straight parking. The household didn't vote for straight parking. And if that was what Measure A read, I could have saved you a lot of time. There's been, on a different note, as a member of the ASRB, our job is to look at projects as they relate to the design guidelines of the code and to make recommendations so that they can move forward in compliance with the code and with respect to the design guidelines. We don't actually approve projects unless I have my job on. So we kept our conversation and our deliberation in our meeting to the task at hand. And I, for one, kept my comments on that record to the task at hand. And apparently hitting my mic. I am for outdoor dining, and I am for more parking. But I am not for the project as it's presented. And I do encourage you to look at those 2 distinct issues that are before you as 2 distinct issues that aren't bound together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Middleman. Yes, sir. Go all the way back to you. Rob.
Hi, I'm Rob Solomon. I live at 1450 Kenyatta. Thanks for doing this. I think it's amazing to have this kind of public discourse, and thank you for doing what you do. I feel really bad for you guys because the Planning Commission put you in a horrible position by not doing their job. I think when I built a house on the scenic corridor, I couldn't even paint it white because that violated the ethos or the aesthetic or something crazy. And my wife's dream of a beautiful white farmhouse was thrown up in smoke, but we dealt with it. I don't know how the Planning Commission can even think about allowing this paved behemoth to become part of the scenic corridor. It doesn't make any sense. So I think it's all been said, but I think you just have to decouple everything. So outdoor dining, good. A little bit more parking, good. Rezoning as commercial, probably bad. Destruction of this beautiful open space that exists there, really bad. It doesn't make any sense. And ruining the scenic corridor, it doesn't hold water. So you got to send this back to the ASRB, back to the Planning Commission, back to Mr. Tanner, back to Mrs. Roberts, and have them figure out how to do this properly, because this is ugly. It's antithetical to Woodside. It doesn't make any sense. So I don't know why we're here again a month after that first meeting, when they didn't really listen to any of the recommendations that were made. So a lot of things don't make sense. And I think you guys are smart, you care, and you're hearing a lot about impassioned pleas, and Measure A, pretty good, but it didn't call for rezoning and destruction. It called for some outdoor dining, some play spaces, an amphitheater, and everything's been conflated into this bullshit thing of, hey, we need more parking, we need outdoor dining. It all has to be put together. It doesn't. So do your jobs, which are hard, and send this thing back to the Planning Commission, because I have no idea how that could have passed the Woodside ASRB and Planning Commission. It doesn't make any sense. And if you're analytical and you figure out from the perspective of how it made it to this point, you have to question them and probably ask for their resignations. I don't know how it got here. So I'm going to stop there. And thank you again for your service. It's amazing what you do. And this is a tough one. And I hope you do the right thing for the city, the town, the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. Anyone else? Ms. Lubin.
You actually took half my speech. I won't say how many. I'm not going to pull rank and tell you how long I've lived in town, because it'll give away my age. But I do think you have three choices tonight. One is to deny, one is to approve, and one is to send it back. There is an either or component. I've been to many restaurants where you walk in, the back section is closed and the parklet is open. There are compromises. I think this should go back to the drawing board. If I were designing a house for you, I'd present you with 3 or 4 proposals. I wouldn't just slap something down and say, you must build this exactly this way. I think the proposal, I like outdoor dining. We do probably need some more parking, but again, a traffic study would help. I find, and I have talked to Christine Roberts, I find their unwillingness to even consider some of the input disheartening. Steve, my husband Steve, came up with an alternate plan. That may not be the best. There may be other options. We haven't explored it. I think this is half-baked. Yes, let's do it, but let's do it right. We don't get a do-over. We can make it work. It's not a zero-sum game. And I think we can all come together and have input and take the best of all the really good ideas. The lighting needs to be looked at. The landscaping in the parking lot needs to be looked at. There are a lot of things we can do here. As an architect, I find it extremely frustrating that I can't just say, okay, here's a sketch, build this. But I would also want input. I would like to say, how can we make this better? How can we look at it in 10 years and say, we did a good thing instead of we really screwed up? So there's no rush on this, like the housing element. We can do it right, and that's what I'm asking. Thank you.
You, Ms. Lubin. Anyone else in the audience?
Oh, twist my arm.
All right, Mr. McNiven. Part 2.
I was really not gonna. I wasn't gonna speak. I know, but I always like to be on the microphone. Oh, this is really, really, really tough for us. Like Rowan said, I mean, he said everything for us. We're in the service business. I'm not gonna cry, but what I will say is we spend all day long trying to serve people, trying to serve the guests that walk into a restaurant, trying to serve our neighbors, trying to be at service to the community. And
We are not going to stop doing that, no matter what you do here tonight. You know, I feel really lucky. I feel lucky to live in the greatest town on earth. I feel lucky. I feel like I have enough. I have this amazing wife, 3 great kids. I have a house. I eat good food. I interact with amazing people. I have enough. So whatever you decide, I'm going to support you. I will not stop doing my best with my brothers to serve this town, to serve this community, to serve our neighbors, to be the best stewards, and to be the best people of service that we can be. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McNiven.
If Christine ever sells, and Mickey, you want to team up and buy the parking, the whole Kenyatta Corners with me, and Rob, we will manage it. We will make sure it is the quietest. You will not be able to hear a pin drop. I love Christine. I love the Roberts family. They have been so good to us over so many years. But I didn't want to plant that seed
Okay.
on the record.
Thank you, Mr. McNiven. Anyone else in the room? Here we go. Mhm. The red button will do it.
If there's, so I guess my question is, if there's a world in which you can change the code or do something from the municipal code to allow outdoor dining without doing anything to the parking lot, decouple these two things, why wouldn't you just do that? And I guess my other comment is it does have this like undercurrent of like a little bit of feeling like we're being bullied by Christine Roberts and we have to accept this terrible parking lot, otherwise she's going to walk, instead of really pushing for something that's appropriate and in the tone of Woodside and not just paved concrete. It just feels really icky. It's like, if you're going to do it, but do it right. And don't be bullied by this like threat that she's going to walk if it's not approved tonight. And if she is going to walk, then do something so we can have outdoor dining without the parking, because it sounds like you can do that. So that's all.
Thank you, Ms. Spunk. We're going into almost last call. Mr. Shaw wants to speak.
Chris Shaw, citizen. It's hard to appreciate how hard it is to stand up at this microphone and speak to you guys. So I applaud everyone who's gone before. I thought it was really hard sitting up there getting my teeth kicked in for 9 years, but it's harder standing up here. Quick background, because Measure A clearly states to rezone the parcel in Kenyatta Corners with surface level parking to support outdoor dining. It's a very simple statement. The second statement refers to the area over here by the town museum. Secondly, I think it is pretty awful to stand up here and use dog whistles about outsiders coming into Woodside. Every time you cross our town boundaries, you are an outsider. It does make one wonder what political views are if you're using outsiders as a reason to deny a property. More importantly, you have a building application in front of you. And no, I did not prompt Alex Tauber this evening to come up, as much as I appreciate it. But he is correct in that I have always tried in my time in public service, including on this project, to get to speak with both the applicant and usually the people that are affected by a project, whether it's 1101 Kenyatta in a 10-acre subdivision or paving a parking lot in support of outdoor dining. And I've put in a fair amount of time on both sides of this issue. But you do have a building application in front of you. And that application, I think you can find some compromises on. Despite what's in front of you, you can say, we want a fence. You can say, we want security cameras on top of light poles. There's any number of things. I wasn't going to bring my notes up, but here they are. You can revisit the CUP. You can ask that the town pay for and install the trails. I believe that these types of working around the edges to try and find something is the way to go. Because as you know, nobody's going to be happy with the decision you make. So if everybody's slightly unhappy, you've probably done your job correctly. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Got anything? All right, Mr. Mason.
Gary Madden. I sat through the ASRB, the planning meeting, and now these meetings. I've heard nothing new, not one thing. It's time to make a decision. Everybody speaks, they want the outside dining. We're not going to have it without parking. It's just that simple. So please, it's over. Make a decision.
Hey, oh, no, it's his microphone.
That's it.
Thank you, Gary.
Okay.
All right, gavel's going to go down on public comment. Nothing in Zoom. All right, we're closing at public comment at 9:02 and going to deliberations for council. So I have been advised that you don't need to go through every finding. If you can't make a finding or you want to drive a point home on a finding, we certainly want to hear that. Otherwise, the presumption is that you agree with the staff report if you don't call those things out. So on that, Councilmember Brown, let's start with you. Sorry to put you in the hot seat to go first, but we'll move down the dais from you.
I'll try to give it a shot. Is this on? Yes. I want to start with Measure A and remind everybody that it called for parking for outside dining. There was strong community support for the proposed parking. It also called for a gathering place of sorts. I think that's one of the things that we've discovered is thanks to the COVID, we have a huge opportunity here to create that gathering place that we wanted. We've created it. Now we got to keep it. We need more parking to do that. The parking has already been overcrowded before the COVID came. Since COVID, we've had, because of outdoor dining, we've had an increase in parking requirements. We also had an increase in parking because almost a third of the households work from home now. That wasn't the case just 4 years ago. That's a huge impact. And then the other thing I want everybody to remember is we're in the process of building 394 new homes, residential living spaces. That's going to bring 700 to 1,000 more people into our community, not to mention more of the same increases in population in other communities surrounding. All of them wanted to take a look at Woodside. So this is going to be another impact on parking. The idea that we can stay as we are, no change, I think is something that is a fantasy that we can't expect to maintain. I'm very sensitive to our neighbors, sensitive to the open space question. I want to remind everybody that the project in front of us retains 71% as open space. So it's not like we're abandoning open space entirely. My specific thoughts of what we should do, pedestrian trails. I think the town could have a role in building those trails. That's our expertise. I don't know why we wouldn't be involved in doing that and perhaps paying to do that. I think they need to be multi-use so that we can accommodate everybody's need. And that would be probably accommodating both B and C in a combination of trails. I think the 10-foot light height with downward facing lighting can work for a parking lot. And it's particularly if it's extended to both parking lots. And I think the proposal that they build two new light fixtures in the back, I think would be fine. As far as helping the neighbors, I like the 4-foot high fence, but I'd also suggest that we perhaps have the landscape committee take a look at what kind of landscaping could be put in that would help provide additional deep screening to screen off any lights that come from the parking lot. Security, I know that's an issue, and I think that the proposal from Robert's project is that they add 2 more security cameras and plug it into their existing security system. Should be something that is acceptable to the majority of the residents. As I said earlier, there's been complaints about the 5 a.m. deliveries. As I said earlier, I've already spoken to both Tyler and Tim Stoddard and at the bakery. They both have had conversations with all their vendors and have in writing the policy that they will be fired if they violate the 6 a.m. arrival time. I think that's a good start. And it'd be very simple to prepare a project that says, if the town receives a complaint, we pass it on to one of them, whoever's companies involved, and let them discipline their suppliers. I've been a businessman. I know if I told a vendor, you violate my policy, you're gone. He doesn't want to violate my policy. So I think that's pretty much, I think, where we would give it as a start.
Okay, Dick, can I just get your feed on a couple other things? Would you be interested in giving direction to staff to bring back the municipal parking code, to take put an extra pair of eyes on our current traditional square foot ratios?
Yes,
Okay,
I'd like to see it based on customers.
and customers versus seats, you would be,
Yep.
okay. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Wall.
All right, here I go. So maybe I think there's a fair amount of deliberation that we could do here. So before I kind of go into the elements that I think we should deliberate on, I'll say that, I mean, it's clear to me that outdoor dining is a real benefit to Woodside. I think people really love it. I love it. I think it brings a huge sense of community and lots of joy to the people that are able to benefit from it. So I'm very supportive of outdoor dining. And then when I think about this proposed parking lot expansion, my framing all along has been, I want to feel as though the property owner is putting forth something that reflects them being a good neighbor and being a good landlord. And for me, that's really where the meat of the issue is here, is does the CUP reflect a development that is going to be a good neighbor and going to be a good landlord? I think in a lot of ways it does, but I still think there's some room for improvement. So that's kind of where I want to focus the deliberations. I also just want to acknowledge a couple of things. I very much want to preserve the small town nature of Woodside. So I want to make sure, to the extent possible, that this development, or this, if it should it be approved, like that this parking expansion does, preserve the small town nature of Woodside. I also want to acknowledge there is definitely a traffic problem, and I think I like the suggestions for a traffic study. I think a traffic study in connection with our town center plan proposal will be really beneficial. Personally, I was really frustrated that the property owner demanded the removal of the parklets. On the other hand, I also want to acknowledge the efforts of the property owner to put this proposal forward. So a bit of a mixed feelings there. So kind of getting down to the brass tacks of the CUP, and I was the one that suggested reordering the CUP. So it's a little bit easier for me to understand and to kind of follow, like, what is the CUP requiring? And so one thing that I don't see in the current CUP that I have seen in at least one other CUP for a shopping center is a term or an ability to kind of reopen it and look at it again. And so I really think, having something in there, whether you call it a term or something else, that lets us revisit it after a period of time, whether it's 12 months or 24 months, just to make sure that it's working, right? That people are being a good neighbor, people are being a good landlord. So I think it'd be really important to include an element like that into the CUP. See, I'm gonna go through my notes here. I'd also be supportive of changing the references to seats to patrons. I'm not a restaurant owner, like I said, but my understanding is that the state of the industry really has moved from talking about seats to talking about patrons. And there's, readily available software that tracks the number of people that are sat. And that could be, the CUP could require that the property owner and the restaurants utilize that type of software. So I just think the notion of counting seats and having to physically go out and count seats just feels a little anachronistic to me. It was mentioned that the current CP doesn't have any delivery hours. I think we should put delivery hours in there, make it really clear that deliveries can only occur during certain hours. I think we should include penalties for violations of the delivery hours, because I think we've heard pretty clearly that the impact to the neighbors is pretty severe, that they're being woken up, and clearly, the current enforcement of that's not working. On the topic of the trail, couple things. I'm not opposed to the town paying for the improvement of the trail. I was pretty persuaded by the individual that said, if the property owner is willing to dedicate an easement, which they don't have to do, it's not unheard of for the town to pay to improve and build the easement or build the trail per the town specifications. So I'd be open to that. I've also come to kind of not love the idea of a solid fence, although I know a benefit of the solid fence is that it'll provide some screening for the neighbors. So on the one hand, I very much want there to be really effective screening so that headlights aren't shining into the neighbors' bedrooms. I mean, that wouldn't be great. On the other hand, a solid fence along a trail where children are going to be walking to school and biking, and just doesn't sound ideal. And also a solid fence is really ugly, and we don't see a lot of solid fences in Woodside. So given all of the factors, I would love for the CUP to really require the right kind of landscaping and plantings that will provide effective screening for the neighbors and be really rock solid on that requirement. So that's my thoughts on the trail. I think I'm okay with what's in the CUP regarding the security. I think adding 2 additional cameras on the light poles will help with the security of the center. And I also like the staff report that requires the parking lot to have security barriers to prevent after hours access. I think that's a really important component of the CUP. And yeah, I guess I would really encourage some deliberation from my fellow council members on the specific items I just brought up.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Wall. Councilmember Avarish, we're going to jump to you, sir.
So I think that my first, take on this.
Well, sometimes they can't on Zoom, so you got to talk pretty close to these things. Yeah.
Got it. So my first take on this, I obviously just got voted on. So but I do remember voting for Measure A. And then once I learned more about this project, I personally felt that I didn't fully understand it when I had voted for it. And so for me, I don't believe that it's as clear as it could have been. And so, reading it, it specifically does reference Cañada Corners. And so I do think, there's been some confusion, I think, on what was in here. And the proposed language to be added does address that specific property and says surface parking to permit outdoor dining within Cañada Corners, trails, and play structures. I think the additional language about the gazebo, the amphitheater, I think was a bit confusing. So personally, I don't believe that, I don't look at this as people voted for this. People were thinking this is exactly what they were going to get. We're voting for a parking lot. We're going to get a parking lot. That's not what I was thinking when I voted for it. So, setting that aside, so I just don't put a lot of weight into that. I also have concerns that, looking at the number of seats, and so actually first I want to go back. I totally support outdoor dining. I think everybody appreciates outdoor dining. I think everybody wants outdoor dining. I don't think there's any dispute about that within town. And I saw a lot of emails about how much people want outdoor dining. Go ahead and, a lot of them said, go ahead and pass. I don't think they really care. It's just, we need the outdoor dining. That's the bottom line. What I really do wonder is if the seating was in compliance with the CUP, and I think I'm open to expanding the CUP to allow more seating per parking and to revise that. I think that's a good idea. I think it's something we should strongly consider. What I don't know, if we were so far over capacity that we were seating double the number of people that should be allowed in the restaurants, and what would it look like if that wasn't the case? If that's corrected and cured, and I think we could even expand what the current footprint is and what's allowed, and to allow for outdoor park seating and more of it. Not more than what's current, there when these counts were made, and when the decision was made that we needed additional parking. Let's see. So I really do wonder, if you consider that, and then if there's, I don't know if there's another way, but currently, my understanding is that all the employees from the market are currently parking, which removes about 20 to 25 parking spots a day, I think. Okay. So I also, I agree with Councilmember Wall's statements about modifying the CUP to add delivery hours. I think that's a great idea. I also agree with security barriers to ensure security. And I want to say, I ultimately do actually support additional parking. I think it is necessary. I think we do need more parking. I don't know. What I wonder is if it's possible to add more parking, a smaller amount of parking, because what we've been looking at is parking when we have this impact of significant overseating. But if you remove that element, how big is the issue? Do we actually need the number of additional spots that we're looking at or not? Because, as of right now, or prior to this past week, or whenever all the outdoor seating was removed, you had whatever the parking is minus, I think it's 10 spots, I believe, were removed for the outdoor dining. And so 8 spots. So 8 spots less than what was originally there. And then, so could we get away with adding 20 more spots or something like, something instead of adding 68 more spots to the back, or 30 spots? I think these are things worth exploring. I don't like the thought of rushing into this. I don't think we are. I mean, obviously this has been in the works for years and years. I'm sure it's very frustrating for the property owner, and I can appreciate that. I can sympathize with that. But at the same time, I also think that there are alternatives, and I feel like we're kind of at the extreme on what we're considering right now. That's where I'm standing right now.
Okay, and can I just get really 3 quick inputs from you real quick. Would you be okay if the town at some point was involved in the build out and development of trails?
Yes.
Okay. And sounds like you do want direction one way or the other given to staff to bring back issues around parking requirements and studies.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And if we do get to a place where we're talking about the CUP and seats versus customers, how do you feel about that issue?
I think I'm okay expanding it. I think we survived, you know, I always was able to find parking, even if I had to park far away personally, even with the reduced parking and the, we'll call it, you know, overseating, whatever, not blaming the restaurant owners, but even given those issues, I was always able to find it. So I think that there is some room for expansion there.
And before I go to Mayor Pro Tem Gold, council members Wall and Alberici both talked about security barriers. What are you specifically saying when you say security barriers? Are we talking about a chain? Are we talking about something far more significant than that?
I'd be okay with the chain personally. I think that would do the job. I don't think people are going to drive.
Okay. Smart Wall.
I'm fine with what's currently in the packet, which talks about a security barrier in the parking lot to prevent after hours access. So I'm not really hung up on like whether it's a chain or something else, as long as it does what it says it's going to do, which is a barrier that prevents, like actually prevents after hours access. So
Okay.
I would be fine with the chain.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Gold, you are up, sir. You're a big deal.
Okay. I was actually very impressed with what Matt Apfel said, and I'm even more impressed that he managed to say it in about a minute and a half. And for those of you who know me, I don't take a minute and a half to do anything. And I have a lot of notes here, so I apologize in advance. I want to be very clear. First of all, thanks to everybody for participating. I think, you know, somebody had commented that what a great exercise in our town for coming out here and voicing our concerns and our opinions. I think everybody's legit. I think everybody's making their points, and I personally appreciate it. And I've got people who I'm very friendly with on both sides of this issue. I want to be very clear though, and I think our newest council member said it perfectly there. Everybody supports outdoor dining. I haven't heard a single comment either at the last meeting back in October or this meeting tonight, or any member of the town council oppose outdoor dining. And yet we've gotten 93% of our letters say they support outdoor dining. It's sort of they're preaching to the choir. We support it too. Nowhere in those letters, by the way, did it ever mention the word parking or lot. I'll just point that out. I love the two restaurants that are there. McNivens know that. I actually ate at Buck's with our new mayor a couple of days ago, and yesterday I was at the bakery with Ned Fluid. So I'm there quite a bit. I love the restaurants. I think they're fantastic, and I think they are a real asset to the town. And I certainly enjoy the outdoor dining. One of the points that's been made, and it was made in the letters that we received, was these delays, that we have to do this without delay. And yet, I feel like we do have a gun to our head, like if we make any changes, that suddenly this thing is going to collapse. And I don't think that that's fair either. I think that the Roberts family has been a real asset to this town, and I like them a lot. But when you hear that, you know, you make any changes to this thing, even a fence or, you know, putting a tree in an island, that's not particularly helpful, as I think Councilmember Wall put it. I mean, you know, I think we have an opportunity here to make changes, and we want to be able to do that and end up with a better project. The first time we heard this about delays was at our last meeting on October 22nd. We never even got to deliberations. All we heard was some, you know, questions to staff and a little bit of public comment. And I would just point out that the plans that were submitted to us had errors on them. We couldn't approve them no matter what. We needed to make the applicant had to make changes, and then we certainly are able to have comments. That's legitimate. I think a big part of this problem dates back to the pandemic. And we needed to expand outdoor dining to accommodate these businesses. And I think that that was a legitimate thing to do, and I think it was the right thing to do. But part of what was talked about was flex seating. That is, we weren't expanding the number of seats or patrons in a restaurant. We were just saying, you know, if you put 60 seats outside, take 60 seats away from the inside. I remember having a meeting, it was one of my very first meetings here, where we heard from business owners there that said, this has been a problem because suddenly we're seating an awful lot more people. And I think that you're exactly right. This has been the root of the problem. It's difficult to take something that's being violated so blatantly and then suddenly come up with some method of abating it or easing it that we didn't really contemplate here. This is a big, important project, this parking lot, and we do have questions and concerns. And some of those concerns are noise, open space, trails, circulation, traffic, conducting business, lighting, safety, security, landscaping, and fencing. These are legitimate. We shouldn't be, you know, have a gun to our head to make these decisions as take it or leave it. I think that we do need to protect neighbors who have legitimate concerns. They haven't been addressed in a timely manner. I think that, you know, to Councilmember Brown's point about the businesses say that they'll make changes, they could have been making these changes over the last 3 years. I mean, these complaints didn't happen yesterday. These have been going on for years. And when the complaints are made, you can tell the delivery trucks to come at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. We don't have to wait for that. The violations of the permit could have been cured long ago. They're going on today, tonight. I think that sort of impacts me. I take it a little bit differently, that if people wanted to cure it, if they wanted to make it right, they could have done it anytime on their own. My point comes down to this. This is my key issue. And it's probably going to upset some people. I actually don't have a big issue with the parking lot. I don't have a big issue with, I certainly don't have one with outdoor dining. My question comes down to, do we even need parking at all? We don't know that because we're seating so many more people than the permit allows. And as soon as you take out, we just took out 120 seats just within the last couple of weeks by taking one parklet with 60 seats, the other one was 60 seats. And although I did see the video that the McNiven sent me, I appreciate that. I love you guys. I mean, you guys are, you're our town, and I appreciate that. Back at you. And so I just wanted to, you know, I think that, and by the way, I sat down with the McNivens in their restaurant a couple of weeks ago. We talked about it, and they told me parking's always been an issue. And that it goes back to, you know, even in the 90s, it was an issue. I believe them. I think it, you know, it may very well be an issue. But when you're seating, you know, when you're seating 194 more patrons than there's a permit for, which according to the applicant's own numbers means somewhere between 97 cars is their number, which is two patrons per car, or 50 cars if it's 4 patrons per car. I mean, it's somewhere between 50 and 97. And we're proposing 34 more parking spaces. Maybe this could be cured by just you know, abiding by the terms of the permit, something that we've been talking about for a long time. So I don't even know if we were on the terms of the permit, abiding by them, would we be having this parking problem? And I have to tell you from my own experience, and the mayor actually made this comment to me too, when we showed up for breakfast the other day, we couldn't help but notice there was like a lot of parking. Now I agree, 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning may not have been the most opportune time, but you know, I haven't really experienced that before. And it seems like since 120 seats went away, that parking has suddenly become a bit easier. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not there every single day, but it does seem to be a little bit easier today than it had been before. My point is that outdoor dining does not necessarily equal parking. They're not, you know, I think that they're related, but one doesn't cause it. We've had outdoor dining without the parking lot, and we could have the parking lot and not have outdoor dining. I mean, it's sort of like one or the other. They're not necessarily interlinked. I'm perfectly fine that if we need the parking, if we have a surplus, we may not need it. If we have a deficit, then let's build it. I will support it 100%. But it does sound to me, from what I'm hearing tonight, maybe the issue is not quite ripe yet, and we're not quite there. So I'm sympathetic, and I think that when you're seating so many more patrons, almost 200 more patrons, of course parking's a problem. That's no kidding, it's a problem. We sort of get that. I mentioned before that enforcement was an issue, and I'm glad to hear Councilmember Wall talk about it as well. I'm perfectly fine with patrons versus seats. I agree with that. And I want to read something. I'm going back to the ASRB meeting minutes from September 19th, 2016, when this original CUP was heard, I think, the one that we're currently operating under. And we were talking about seating, and Chair Lubin, Thalia Lubin, had asked this question about the flex seating. That is, if you're going to add seats, can we take away seats? And a representative from the bakery said, during the time the conditional use permit was granted, the original conditional use permit dating back even before this, nobody contemplated a reservation system that calculates how many seats would be in use at any given time. For example, open table. This is somebody from the bakery talking now. Would the ASRB be open to a system in which the restaurant commits to never seating more than 70 people during the hours of operation and 95 people at night? This is easily checkable by staff. Planning department can stop in anytime and ask to see the computer, and the computer will say exactly how many people are seated. This was back in 2016, by the way. That would avoid having to, darken one specific room, which is something that I think Ms. Lubin had alluded to, as staff is asking, or picking up furniture and stacking them in the parking lot. We don't want that either. Director Young asked to clarify the reference and said that this was probably an unworkable system because she didn't want staff having to go over there and check on it. But we know that the system is in place because it was in place in 2016. So patrons would seem to be the way to go and an easy way to do it. And I think that abiding, as Matt Apfel had said, abiding by the terms of the conditional use permit that's in place today. By the way, I'd be perfectly willing to go with what's proposed, the 117. But I think that we need to see some sign of compliance from the tenants here to make this thing work. The last thing I wanted to mention is there's a lot of finger pointing. Enforcement has been very, very difficult, and it's completely unfair to the residents to call the town, who tells them to call the property owner, who tells them to call the tenants and go that way. I just want to ask you a question. If you had a neighbor who was violating a permit, let's say that they were doing construction on Sunday, in the house next to you, real busy, loud construction, and you complain to the town, and they said, well, call the neighbor and he'll ask his contractor. That's not the way it's supposed to work. When there's a complaint made, and there's been complaints made by somebody in this room almost every meeting we've had for 2 years, that deserves to be investigated. We need to have a finding, and we need to come back. And I'm well aware that the town council, I think, mistakenly said we're not going to enforce that. I think that that was wrong because of the flex seating that I had talked about just a moment ago. So I mentioned earlier that I think, and this is something I think Councilmember Wall was alluding to, I think that any conditional use permit, and I'm perfectly fine with a time limit on this, but I do want to see compliance, and I think there should be some voluntary sanction that if they violate the seating, that they pay a fine. I don't want to have to enforce, I don't want to have to go over there and count, but they've got a computer system that will say that they sat more people. For every person you seat over the number, I don't know, pay a fine, pay $100. I don't know what the number is, but that's to make you live up to your representation that says you understand and you've agreed to abide by it. Well, agree to abide by it and stick to your number. And if you stick to your number, we're not going to have a parking problem, which might eliminate some of this. So enforcement is a very big deal. And I think that, and I'm perfectly fine with saying, let's do it, try it for a month, 6 months, a year, whatever the number is. And if there's compliance, I'm perfectly fine with removing it. But I think we've gone for 3 years with this, what I think is an intolerable situation and an unfair situation. I don't want to comment on the price of our restaurants or who they're catering to or out-of-towners or Measure A, which I supported and still do support. Whatever the vote count was, it passed. It's the rule. It's the law. And the town, as Steve Patrick said, there is change coming down. As I mentioned also, Christine Roberts has been a big part of the town, the Roberts family. I really appreciate what they've done here. It also sounds like we're just not there yet. There's just too many open issues here. For me, the most important one is that I don't even know if the parking is an issue yet. That is that until we find if if we're overseating by 200 people, it's an issue. When it comes down to what the permit says, as Matt Epfel says, that's when we should take the measure. Hopefully I've answered your questions, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Gold. Okay. So it sounds like we have, we're going to have a split decision here. So let me see if there's any ground that we can close a little bit. There's been this question about, do we even need it? So the population of Woodside and the surrounding communities are going to grow, and they're mandated to grow. Even if population growth is only 2%, the population will double in 35 years of Woodside and the surrounding community. So we are talking about 34 spots. We're not asking, the ask, I guess, is not 150 or something to double. If you have a long-term sort of strategic planning hat on, you say, and we're going to run out of parking in 5 or 10 years later, right? So there's always this question, how much do you need? Do we need a study? Or do we just have an observable parking deficit today and knowledge about what is being mandated? And is that enough to make a decision about this project? Does that in any way influence either of you on your views on whether this is something that could go forward tonight or not? And I just want to reiterate, this is called council deliberations. We're quiet when the public speaks. The public's quiet when we speak. It works that way because we have an orderly process. We're trying to get a transparent and good decision out of this. Yes.
Let me comment. I think you make a good point. I did review the census information at our last meeting, and I think that our town has grown by 18 people over the 10-year period. And that's even with all the housing and everything else that's gone on. Over the prior 10-year period, I think it was less. It was 13 or something. I mean, it's not growing by very much. And I think somebody made the point that since 1980, it's actually shrunk a bit. There's lots of businesses here. I mean, you could say the same argument about Roberts Market. I mean, if we're going to be growing by that much, they better build a bigger parking lot too. You could say that about virtually any business. And I think that there's lots of businesses in this world that just because the town grows doesn't necessarily mean that they have to, add a second or third floor to it or add more parking to it. So I think your point is well taken. As I said, I am perfectly fine with adding parking, just as they've proposed, by the way, if there's a deficit. There may be a surplus right now. We just don't know because of this overseating that's going on that I think we've heard from at least a couple of members of the council.
Well, let me approach it one other way and then I'll drop it. Any project that gets undertaken has to be economically feasible to the person that's taking it on. So if you're already spending, I don't know, I have no idea what the economics are, but if they're spending $75,000 a spot, maybe they're willing to do that, trying to get the rate of inflation and as a rate of return or something. Are they going to spend $150,000 to have half the spots is the question? Probably not. When Councilmember Eberish, when you say that, hey, I don't know, maybe a smaller lot, 20 units or something instead of 34, is there any element of the business economics that need to be at play for a project to happen that might change your view?
Yeah, I think that there are certain aspects of this. I would say that, that if there were certain parts of it that I'm not completely against it. I'll just throw that out there. I'm not totally against the parking. It was just kind of a thought,
Okay.
that I'm wondering if there is but I get your point that it's not quite that easy. I do think it's 68 spots, I think, that are actually in the new parking aspect. I think it's a total increase of 34 because
That's right,
they're
net
deducting. So that was my thought.
Got it. That's helpful. There's also ground on enforcement and compliance that we might want to figure out if there's anything. Enforcement is important. If we had a rational parking plan in place. We had the traditional square foot ratios revisited, and a rational project got approved and built, and then we had a final CUP that was rational in that context, then yes, absolutely, there should never be a reason for being out of compliance. Is that something you want to try to make sausage on tonight in terms of delivery hours and term? Or if we're bringing this back in the first quarter, under the assumption that, I mean, I didn't ask, and maybe that's a question that we could ask, you know, are these parklets gone until the project's up and going next summer, right? So I don't know how much time we have to sort of think it all through, but if we could come to terms on a more enforceable CUP, would that change your views in, or is that necessary even to reach to a conclusion tonight? Yeah,
Wanting.
I'm looking
wanting
at
some-
anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've spent a lot of time on this issue. I think Measure A passed a number of years ago. I think the issue is ripe. And I think we have a pretty good CUP proposal in front of us. I think some sausage making on the margins, given what we've heard tonight. I don't think we can ignore some of the feedback we've heard tonight. So I think some sausage making is necessary, but I don't think, in my mind, we need to put it off. I think we can accomplish it tonight.
Only on the enforcement side, because I think it's such a critical issue, but I will tell you this, that one of the things that the tenants could do now is comply with the terms of their CUP, which I think they should have been doing for the last 3 years, but we'll put that aside. But I think that they should comply with at least, at minimum, what they're proposing, the number of seats that are there. And I think that they need to address the noise issue immediately. There's no excuse for that going on one more day, either one.
Yeah.
And I think that would be a sign of just a show of good faith that says they understand the issue and they understand we're serious, and that would address the enforcement issue for me.
I believe they tell you that they are enforcing. Is that right, Tyler? Are you enforcing the 6 o'clock in the morning noise ordinance?
You know what? I would say probably 1/5 of the violations are us, maybe less.
I know, but it's not happening. You agree that, but the answer is it happening to this question?
It's not.
I know that you're-
All right,
We don't need to engage the
let's-
public.
Make sure
This
we
is,
understood that.
okay, I appreciate that.
Action on that.
Okay. Did you get what you wanted out of that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, I need a little help, Gene. If we start with trying to make a little sausage right now, it's just the simple issues around term, around delivery hours, obviously around enforcement of the CUP if it gets approved tonight. And we want to put teeth into it. Where is a starting anchoring place that we could begin?
So what I've heard from the dais this evening is that you want, there are several things I've heard. One, some short period of time where certain things would be required of the businesses in the center, and they would report back to you on whether or not they're complying. I've heard that as one suggestion. I've heard another suggestion that they be required to provide you with computer information on how many people they're seating, because that would give you a true measure of whether or not they're in compliance. That's something that you could require as part of the CUP. That would get you, then if you want to review it in a month, 6 months, I think I heard a month, 6 months, year, you could do that.
Okay.
Could we implement a penalty, whether it's $100? We could decide what the right amount is for deliveries that occur out. One, I think we should put in delivery hours, but two, could we put an actual penalty in the CUP every time there's a violation of the delivery hours? It's a $100 fee. Could we do that?
You could. you don't have anything, I will say again in your underlying ordinances, but as long as you provide some level of due process so that there's a demonstration that you have an actual violation versus, a complaint of a violation that nobody has determined whether it's correct or not. You need to ensure that it's demonstrated you actually have a violation.
And just thinking this through, due process could be, well, the property owner has security cameras trained at the egress and or the exit points. So we would be able to verify, by looking at security footage, whether or not there was actually a delivery that occurred outside
Correct.
of delivery hours. I mean,
Correct.
that would be enough due process, right?
You'd need to have something that could be brought to you as a council, and it could come immediately to you if you wanted that versus going to your planning commission first. But you would need to make that determination.
So it would have to be the town council.
Yes, I would suggest it would be the town council. Because otherwise it's going to be an appeal to the town council. So if what you're interested in is a speedy resolution of those alleged violations, I would suggest it would come to you.
I mean, I think a more practical approach, again, I defer to your legal advice, but a more practical approach would be something that could be handled, at a lower, by the planning director or by, it's not super practical to bring those kind of things to town council. So if there's a way to get the result that we want without having to elevate it to the town council, I'd be in favor of that.
Can I address that? So I brought this up before to the town attorney and to the mayor. In the business that I used to be in, when we had violations, we were self-policing. And I don't know that that's necessarily the way to go here, but I would point out maybe for patron seating, it's a little more applicable than a noise violation, but I would make that a condition. In other words, the applicant, permit holder, is going to agree to this as one of the, just like any other condition that they have conditions on their hours and they have conditions on their days. Well, they have a condition that if they seat somebody beyond the 95 or the 117 or whatever the number is, that they're going to pay a fine. They've got the computer system. They can just send the check in at the end of every week or something like that. But I mean, to me, we can make that a condition so that there is no enforcement that we have to do. I don't want to be out there policing them. We could audit them if you want to. But the other thing is that a noise complaint could trigger it as well. So I think that that's a little more difficult to self-police, I think, because I'm not so sure that they're going to be as aware of noise complaints as something else. That's a little harder to do. I think patron seating is pretty easy because they've got the computer system
I think
already in place.
noise complaints they'll be aware of because the neighbor will complain.
Well, I said, if it's triggered by a neighbor complaint, that's fine. It's not self-policing then, it's a neighbor making a complaint.
All right. This is the problem with sausage.
Sausage.
No, I know. So I will suggest that, we're going to look at the tradition, I hope we're going to look at traditional square foot issues right away in January. Could we, if we got to just patron seating, if you will, with a fine tonight, and we've got farther to go, I guess. You can always look at this again, or how does that, we are not able to reopen a CUP once it's granted. It has to be done tonight.
Well, not if you add a term.
No,
put a term on it.
You have other CUPs that you've put reporting back terms on, so that would not be anything new.
Okay,
Go a long way for me.
okay. 6-month term?
It's fine. Well, I think a 6-month trial, and assuming that it's in compliance, I would eliminate.
Okay, let me come back to something more simple then. You said no to the 4-foot fence.
I definitely want a fence.
You do?
I think my ideal state is a non-solid 4-foot fence that has really robust screening on the western edge that will actually screen, right? And I don't know anything about plants, but I understand we could specify or be really a bit more crisp on what the screening requirements are.
Right, and if that's part of a public process too, people could have a heck of a lot of input along the way if the town is taking care of it.
Sorry.
If the town winds up doing trails, if you will, and landscaping and trails are involved, coming up with a plan, people could really weigh in along the way about making sure the screening is robust enough. I'm trying to say, agree with you in a,
Yeah. I'm trying to process what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same.
not that late yet. We've gone later. Okay. All right, can I take a shot at this? Okay, all right. So, and I'm gonna skip all the flowery language and just get to the point. I think we have some form of consensus. We have a consensus, I believe, that is at least a majority rule for an as-is approval on net 34 spaces with sensible mitigation, a 4-foot fence that's not solid, but a situation where we take over the trails, development and maintenance up to and including trails B and C. We engage our trails committee, we engage our landscaping team, we engage our staff, and we make sure that we do the best darn job we can to do incredible screening. What I wrote down is lighting is 2 10-foot down lights and 2 security cameras. Is that, do I have at least 2 votes on that somewhere? Okay. And sorry guys, I'm just looking at the notes. Delivery hours 6 a.m. Although, what are we saying we're going to do there? Okay, on the CUP, we're talking about approval of CUP as written. Seats become patrons. And a little minor point, cafe seating, which has come up, somebody brought it up. It's not explicitly talked about. It's a form of outdoor dining, but we should explicitly, if there are nods enough around the table, cafe seating should be explicitly called out as long as it meets the regulations, ADA and everything else. Direction given to staff to bring back traditional square foot parking ratios. And
What's the number of patrons?
the number of patrons would be what the CUP says in there, which is, what is it, 117 and 140? I think that's what they are.
Proposed.
That's the proposed, as proposed, but patrons, not seats. Okay. And a term of 6 months so that this thing comes back and we get another look at it. With a $100 fine on the patrons is what you both are throwing out there?
I'm not so hung up on the patrons. I think the fines, in my mind, the fines should be associated with violations of the deliveries that cause noise that
Okay.
are the neighbors.
Okay. And there was, the security barrier also came up, chain or whatever is specified. So could I get a motion on A1 with that as the conditional approval terms as just summarized? And in case I missed anything, could, okay.
Would you consider adding a voluntary sanction for overseating?
What do you mean by that?
$100. Because, I mean, no one's abiding by the conditional use permit today.
Yeah, I thought that's where we were going, actually.
There's no enforcement. So you're back to where you were.
Well, the enforcement is we can go and enforce, right? We can go and do random checks, correct?
Doesn't work.
Why not?
Ask them.
What happens if there's a violation?
Hey, Rob. Yeah, you look, yeah, I know. Okay. All right. Funny to him, but not to many other people. Color me up a little bit on this. What Paul is asking is, basically, we're back to the core issue of enforcement and compliance. How to do it.
Well, I think I heard a suggestion that you would want to use the computer system and do a self-imposing fine for violations. And Councilmember Wall was comfortable with that for the deliveries. And I guess the question is there support on the council for that for seating violations as well, or not?
Just to clarify, I'm not really understanding the whole self-imposed fine. Like the enforcement is a neighbor complains that deliveries are happening before the delivery hours. So there's a complaint, at which point there's a mechanism in the, I'm envisioning a mechanism in the CUP that, if a complaint is verified, which it can be done because there's going to be security cameras, then they pay a fine.
We're saying the same thing. Maybe I used a term that I shouldn't have used.
Okay.
It's self-imposed, but it's a rise demonstration that there's been a violation.
All right, yeah, we're saying the same thing then. But I'm only saying that in terms of like the delivery hours violations. I think for violations of seating more patrons than the CUP allows, I'm envisioning that the restaurants would have a software system in place that a report could be generated to indicate whether or not the number of patrons exceeded the CUP. And then I think that the town council could choose to pursue enforcement or not. I don't see a need to necessarily impose fines for that.
What's the enforcement? I mean, that's the core issue, is the overseating is causing everything. And we're going to come back here and it's just going to continue going.
I mean, I don't know that I see the core issue the same way that you do. And I think we have a new CUP with new patron limits. And, you know, the council could choose to enforce that new limit
With
if
what?
it so chooses.
What are you going to do?
It's enforcement mechanisms.
What's the, I'm asking you, what's the penalty? What's the sanction?
But the town council could choose to set the enforcement officer out there. And I think Jean would do a better job of explaining what our specific enforcement mechanisms are. But I mean, we certainly have the ability to enforce.
I'm asking again, what's the sanction? What are you going to, what's the penalty they're going to pay?
I don't know that there would be. Jean, can you walk us through what it would look like?
I can, but I think there's just a basic disagreement here as to two ways to look at this. And you just, as a council, need to give us some direction on that. You could use an enforcement mechanism where reports are needed to be kept. They could come back at 1 month, 6 months, whatever time frame you put in. You could look at those reports. You could then determine whether or not there have been violations. That's one way to go at it. I think the other thing that's being proposed instead is that there would be reports generated, and if there had been overseating, then there would automatically be a fine that would be, just for, as you're proposing for the deliveries, a fine that would be imposed.
I'm fine with either of those things.
You good with the passive reporting, even though obviously there are holes to that too, but.
Well, it's mine. So we come back and they say, okay, we sat 1,000 people more during the 6 months, and it goes, okay, well, what do we do?
Mhm.
I can't make up a number. It has to be part of the conditional use
Yeah.
permit. I can't just suddenly say, okay, I'm going to fine you $1 a person. There's no basis for imposing that
It's a
fine.
violation of the CUP. I mean, typically you'd
So
have
what are
like
you gonna do?
you get what, a 6-month term, and then you could review the CUP, or you could modify it, or
I'll ask you again, what's the sanction? What are you going to do? Are you going to revoke their CUP and say, close down your business? I'm just saying, you're doing it for money.
Well, sorry,
So
I'm
I'm
looking
just
over, I'm
gonna-
looking over, I mean, Jean, I mean, can you help explain? I mean, we could pursue litigation. We could revoke the CUP. I think like just paint a picture of what enforcement would look like in a scenario where we have a new CUP. We've determined that they're, exceeding, and again, if we change it from seats to patrons, that we're in a scenario where they're, exceeding the patrons, number of patrons by some concerning amount. What specifically could, not saying that we would, but what specifically could the town council do? What are the legal mechanisms available to us?
You can call up the CUP, or you can have an automatic report back in 1 month, 6 months, however many. And then you would take a look at whether or not someone's in compliance. If they are not in compliance under your code as it's currently written, you could amend the CUP, you could revoke the CUP. So that's one approach. The other approach that I hear being suggested is that there be some fining provision put into the CUP itself, so that if there are violations occurring on the seating numbers or the delivery times, that would generate a fine. That a demonstrated violation would automatically generate a fine.
Okay, thank you. That makes it really clear. I mean, I think the point is that there's lots of tools available to the town. So you're asking the question, like, what could be done? There's lots of tools available.
Like what? She just said you could.
All right, listen, this is where I'm trying to draw a line. Here's the great news. Well, there's a couple things. Of course, we could always not make sausage and deal with enforcement in January, but I think there's a push to do that right now. We also have this thing coming back in 6 months because we're just put a 6-month term on it. This is a trial period. Why don't we start at a number that is basically $50 per violation of a seat? Because that's probably a typical ticket for an individual. So you want to give the ticket to the town instead of that, you know, what do you think?
I'm perfectly fine.
Okay, would that work for now? And we can relook at this in 6 months?
Yeah.
Okay,
Per patron.
okay. So with that last adjustment, can I get a new motion for everything that we just, I mean, Reese, the summary you motioned plus the,
I don't think they know what we're talking.
themselves, what do you need from us? You want me to start all the way over at the beginning?
No, can
Okay,
you just give us a second?
okay. All right, seriously.
Okay.
Yeah, you got us?
Yeah, we're gonna try. So, on the big picture that you're talking about, approving this with a 6-month, coming back in 6 months with this
Trial.
enforcement mechanism.
This
is just the CUP. Understood, understood. So we have a couple other questions that we want to make sure that we understand, given the draft conditions of approval that were in your packet. So you've touched on some of them. We just want to make sure that, and I think that's probably the way that we memorialize the directions you've given. And Sage will walk through them in a second. But on this question, you're talking about approving the CUP with the seat numbers that are proposed, not the ones that exist in 2016, and bringing with those numbers effective essentially immediately. And then that's,
Those seat numbers would convert to patrons.
yes, understood. Yep. But effective if you approve this,
Yes,
and then we would revisit in 6 months.
yes.
Okay. And you've got what, a few of the conditions that are in your packet that deal with the issues that you've talked about, security, noise, those things.
Yep.
So we just want to make sure that what we've got here is clear. That hopefully will make it clear what your motion is, and if it's seconded, then you vote on it. Yes, that was on the part. Second part.
No.
Have another public hearing
Yeah.
to discuss this whole new issue.
Yeah.
This is normal deliberations.
Please continue.
Sure. So if we want to, so for the items that we've talked through tonight, just kind of walking through the resolution. So it's item A, page 30, page 15 of the resolution. The first one in the order is noise. And so this is a new condition 1L. And so this is already built in terms of, it's not under the current CUP. But 1L would be addressing
the delivery timeframes. And if that looks good, we can move on.
My lawyer brain is wondering, is there any daylight, we call it commercial loading deliveries? I don't think any delivery of any kind, whether it's commercial or non-commercial or loading, I mean, it should be, there shall be no deliveries on site between 6 a.m. and no later than 8 p.m.
So we could just get rid of the word commercial loading.
Correct.
And with going, there was no concern about outdoor amplified noise during business hours. Security lighting, so N is the next one. So the N talks about putting signage at the front, prohibiting non-employee parking outside of established hours at the center. If that is acceptable, that can remain. The second sentence gets into installing and maintaining security barriers to prevent after-hour access. That would be at the front entrances, the front driveways, so prevent access. Is there any concern about that wording? Okay, seeing none. Then the property owner shall maintain security cameras in the rear parking lot. It does not have a specified number of cameras. I know people talked about 2. So we could install and maintain 2 additional, given that they already have some cameras on the buildings.
Yeah, 2 additional on the lights is what was asked for.
And I think we would need security cameras that are monitoring where the security barriers are going to be. So like the exits, entrances and exits.
So we could add, so we had 2 security cameras. This was in the rear parking lot. Do we want to add and additional cameras?
A security camera at each entrance and exit point.
You're asking for 4 cameras now? Or-
Correct.
No, I'd go to 2.
2?
We have 2.
I mean, well, I'm not just arbitrarily asking for 4. I think it's important to be able to document whether or not the security barrier is actually working and whether or not people are coming in after hours or whether or not to substantiate complaints around deliveries. Like, I think it's really important to know who's coming in and out of the center.
Do we know where the current cameras are located that are existing?
There's some on the west side of the building that I'm familiar with. They're kind of facing the trash areas. The applicants can probably speak to that if we need specifics.
the front, the back.
For people online. Okay. There's several cameras throughout the whole center. So it's highly monitored right now. I think there's about 8 cameras running around the property right now.
Yeah, so my intention is not to just arbitrarily add cameras. I think I would like cameras, and where maybe there's existing cameras that already do this, that are trained on
It's trained on the entrance, both
Okay,
both
then you're
ends,
good.
and they're already trained there.
Great, so I
And
think the
back.
COP should make that clear, that there will be security cameras monitoring the entrance and exit points
Yeah.
at all times.
And we're only going to add 2 more cameras on top of the lights, so it gets the back part of the parking lot. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and so with that, adding that language, there's been talk about enforcement and using those cameras as an enforcement. Do you want to add some language in there that would require the owner to provide the footage of those cameras based on complaints received by the town?
Yes.
And then the last, so the barriers are going to remain. Talked about adding the 2 cameras in the rear and then maintaining cameras that are directed at the driveways. And then the applicant, owner is to provide camera footage to the town based on complaints received for deliveries outside of permitted hours.
For violations of the CUP.
Thank you. And then the last piece here that didn't got discussed a little bit was about the security patrols. Given if there's barriers, obviously, I guess the security patrols could have access to those barriers, but it's something the applicant has asked to remove. It'd be something for the council to consider.
I'm personally good with that removal. I think we're adding. Okay, and yep, we got a nod there. You guys are, doesn't matter. Okay.
Thank you.
You got what you need?
Well, we'll keep moving through.
Keep moving.
And so then we go to O is just saying don't install unpermitted lighting. So P, so this is the property owner shall install and maintain landscaping as shown on the approved plans for the construction permits necessary to implement the CUP. So if the CUP is being approved, this is the CUP number, and it has a landscape plan that would be implemented as part of the construction permit in a condition that we'll get to in just a moment. And this would require the maintenance of that landscaping.
Did we override that with the idea that the town would be taking over the landscaping and trails in that area, or is this a different piece?
No, this is that piece. I understood the trail that the town would pay for the trails. I didn't.
Yeah, that's where I was a little confused on that point. I think the town, we're saying the town will pay for the trail, but not the landscaping, not the landscape screening. I think the issue for me here is that it says the property owner shall install and maintain landscaping as shown in the approved plans for construction permits. But what we heard tonight is that what they've proposed, my understanding, it's not actually effective screening. So I just want to make sure that like the town has some input or has ability to make sure that that landscaping truly does provide effective screening.
And I think a place for that, we could look at the further condition when we get to the condition about modifying the plans for fencing and landscaping. So we can maybe circle back to P if we need to when we get to the next, the condition that will require them to show them on the plan submitted for the construction permits. So then the next one that was part of discussion is condition 1R. This is for the interim measures. And so this is what Manager Bryant was just talking about. So we're talking about allowing the number of seats allowed by the CUP. So that's what's built into each of the restaurants. We'll go through those. And this was envisioning this interim measure being between now and the time that they actually construct the project. The parklets have been removed. They would allow them to increase their seating amongst their existing spaces. And there was talk about coming back to review that in 6 months. But would it be 6 months after the project is completed, or just 6 months from the date of this approval, in which we would just be monitoring the number of seats, their allowance to go above the seat count without installing the parking?
Are you saying when are we going to enforce?
So,
Basically the
so
question?
the idea is if we're coming back to evaluate, are we evaluating after the construction project is complete, or just after the date of this CUP approval that would allow them to increase their seats within their existing spaces?
So it seems that we would want 6 months after the project, would we not? To see how things are actually going.
Correct.
That puts us 12 months to looking at it again.
It could be
Or longer.
Longer than that.
Yes.
And what we had in this interim measure is that if they didn't do this by a certain period of time, that they'd have to revert back to the 2016 seat count. And the reason being is if you just allow them to have more seats now and they never build the project, there's not something built in here that says you need to go back. You're just not, you're not building the parking.
Use the 2016 numbers until the project's built and you have parking.
It's your legal brain.
So my intention on the term suggestion was not to provide like a one-time look back after 6 months. Like, I think we need something in the CUP that allows us to come back every year in perpetuity or every 24 months, you know, to give everybody an opportunity to make sure that the CUP is working. So that was my intention around suggesting the term.
So that,
And that's consistent with what I saw in at least one other commercial center.
yeah, no, that's completely possible. We can add that as just it's a separate, its own condition that relates to the implementation of the CUP itself.
That doesn't answer your question.
No, it's just in the interim period. Well, it does answer my question to some degree, actually. The interim period is that you allow the seats up to the current, what the proposal is today, so the 140 and 117. And then they need to get these construction permits, and they have to commence construction within a year of this town approval. They have 1 year. They have a fair amount of work to do to get construction documents together, easement documents together, go through that process, get those approved. They need to at least start construction within the 1 year time frame, say of tonight, if tonight is the approval date. And should they not have commenced construction within that time frame, they need to revert back to their original CUP count.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
I agree with all that. But point of clarification, aren't we asking them to go to the 117 and what's the other number? I forgot.
Yeah, the 117 and 140.
Effective immediately.
Correct.
I thought you were saying that's only effective after the project.
Now,
Oh, okay, I misunderstood.
we don't have parklets in this equation.
Correct.
Okay. So the parklets, so the temporary ones are gone, and then we have the new, just to make sure everyone understands expectations.
So if they had 20 seats in a parklet, they have to take 20 seats away from the inside.
Right, but they don't have the parklets, is my point, until the project gets permits and gets constructed.
These new limits, well, the proposed limits
They
start immediately.
could potentially squeeze more seats into their interior areas, or in the bakery's case, the back area.
And you're gonna ask for clarification on the valet,
Is that your understanding?
the last sentence?
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, that's a good point. So, the owners brought up concerns about the valet parking requirement as a mechanism for enforcement in this interim period. Without that, it just leaves the parking lot as it is, and there wouldn't be parking management of that degree if we struck that.
If we're going to give the 117, 140, we're going to need the valet to continue. It's pretty obvious. So, okay.
Okay, so I don't think we have any material changes to this condition.
Okay.
This would just allow them to have the increased seats, gives them a time period in which to start construction, and during that time period, they need to have the valet parking. And this is the valet parking extends all the way through the period of completing the project.
Of course.
Sage, so when you say they are allowed the increase of seats, you're saying from 90
Patrons.
17.
And yeah, and so, and yes, we'll get to the seats and patrons.
Or I'm sorry, patrons. I meant.
Okay, so you want to change the seats to patrons in this condition?
Yeah, that's where.
I think it's across the board. We're not
that's
going to talk about seats anymore. Yep.
And so just to be clear, that we'll get to some enforcement mechanisms. We'll have to create new conditions around that. That what we're asking is that these businesses have computer programs in which we will just rely upon those, and they'll have to submit those records to the town. And whatever those records show will be what is used to, so they'll be marking everyone's seats. So, and then with regard to seats to patrons, 140 seats, 117 seats versus patrons, is suggesting that they can have more seats out there with, with no limits.
Because what we care about is the number of people.
Yeah, no, understood. It's just from an enforce, I'm just, as the town, if we start to get calls and we're trying to enforce things, we're just gonna go back to whatever program that they have.
I think what Sage is saying is we're not going to go out there and count seats. We're going to be relying on a computer program that will show you how many patrons were seated, how many patrons were in the
This is what we care about. We care about the parking element and the usage. And it is just what it is. Every 4-top is not 4 people. Every 2-top can, there's just inefficiencies. So I'm not going to worry about that. Okay.
Okay, so now we're moving on to the conditions for the businesses. For Bucks is first. So that's condition number 4. And then it goes on to, I think, the only condition that needs review here would be condition 4E. And so, sorry, I misspoke earlier. I said 140 to 144. And this would be just changed to patrons. And you could do maximum number of patrons. Right now it says seating capacity shall be limited to 144 seats, but we could do maximum patrons at any time shall be limited to 144. So we could do then the same with condition 5E for the Village Bakery. So now we're getting into the changes to the plans for construction permits. So there hasn't been any talk about the open space easement planting enhancement plan that's required. That will still remain in place. So now we have condition, it is 6A7. This is about requiring plans that include safety improvements for the multi-use trail along Kenyatta, adjacent to the site, as well as the improvements adjacent to the site for Woodside Road. So we would not require any improvements along Kenyatta or Woodside Roads, nor the improvements for the on-site trail. I'm sorry, this is just for the trail along Woodside Road and Kenyatta Road.
So I think that stays the same.
So you want them to include those trail improvements on the perimeter of the site?
Yeah, I think the town is contemplating paying for the improvements to the trail that runs from like along Woody the Fish.
Yeah, so that there's the on-site trail that cuts through the site, and then there's the mostly off-site trails, a little bit goes on to the front on Woodside Road. So there's the one along the site on Kenyatta Road, and the one along the site on Woodside Road. And this is saying include plans that provide for those improvements.
So no change there.
So then this one is probably one of the more important conditions here, or at least the one that has most discussed items. Talked about an outdoor lighting plan with code compliant fixtures no taller than 5 feet from grade. So heard it seems that that's not necessary. There's been talk about 2 lights. I just want to get clarity. Their plans show 4 new 10-foot lights. What they have now suggested is to leave in the 2 shorter lights that are about 4 to 5 feet and leave the 2 14-foot tall lights in place and just install 2 new 10-foot lights. And if that's what I'm hearing, we would revise this condition to do that.
The question is bring them all down to 10 or
Either bring them all down to 10 as shown on the plan, or do just the 2 new and leave the existing in place. And
My concern with the existing is that they look really old and almost non-functional. Like I think putting in the new 10-foot down shielded and not just down, I mean, we need to make sure the light doesn't reflect
Yeah,
back.
the ones on the plans, I mean, they meet our code. They're downward facing and shielded. They show at the 2700 Kelvin level, which is a warmer light than a bright light. They may be viewable offsites.
I'd like to hear what my fellow council members think on that.
I would be fine with just leaving the existing and adding the 2 new ones.
I don't see any point in adding it unless somebody can tell me that the forfeit doesn't work.
Okay.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Okay, so
First.
we'll leave the existing lights in place and just add the 2 new 10-foot lights in the expanded parking lot. In our bedroom, you're invited to our bedroom. Thank you for that. So as we're moving through here in the same condition, and we can actually separate these conditions. It's a little confusing to have them together, but just to clarify what we're looking for in terms of the 4-foot fencing. I've heard comments about solid fencing, also about open fencing. If we do open fencing, it could just match the proposed open fencing that's around the other sides of the site. Is there a preference for the solid or the wood fencing?
I was in the solid camp, just for protection of the neighbors, but then you came through with
Yeah,
the,
I'm really advocating for this on behalf of I don't know if the neighbor has a preference. Like, does the neighbor prefer solid fence for?
The neighbor would like to see a 3D plot plan on how the parking with all levels look, because we haven't seen a 3D
So
printed
Mickey, I'm
plan.
sorry, could you just let us know what your thoughts are on the fence, solid versus?
If we don't know the altitude, we don't know if the solid fence works or doesn't work. The applicant has not given a plan where we can see where the parking sits compared to our property. There's no 3D printed plan. I haven't seen a permit that has no 3-dimension plan plot. That's the answer. So if
Okay.
you want the answer, I'm happy to give you the answer, but I just don't know where this fence sits compared to if it's
Okay.
solid or not. That's
Okay.
the question.
Thank you. All right, and I guess I'm fine with solid.
solid.
Okay, so we'll keep the solid 4-foot. Then as that relates to the landscape plan, so we have a landscape plan that is as part of the plan set, but I've heard talk about possibly wanting to change at least those planting types.
Landscape plan is a good screening value to it.
So what I may suggest is, especially with the town, very interested in making sure that you get effective landscaping. I'm not a landscape expert myself, but maybe the town could have a small minor contract with somebody of the town's choosing that could just review the plan and provide some suggestions that could make sure it's evergreen, make sure that all planting when it's installed will be small, it will need to grow up, but at least that we're ensured that the species are compatible, as well as provide effective screening.
You just go to landscape committee and ask for some of that input.
We'll have a landscape committee.
We don't have a
Well, it's a landscape.
club, basically, but yeah, fine. Yes, we'll bring in a consultant to make sure it's done right.
Yes, it was.
That's all right. I don't mean to jar that one. I'm sorry, I
good.
just made a presumption.
Running out of here.
No,
And then we're clarifying that because there was some discrepancy last time, this condition is clarifying that they're doing the Corten wire fence around the east and north sides of the parking lot, not the solid fence that was a little misrepresented last. So we'll just keep that the same. Great, thank you.
Can I, sorry, can I ask a question?
Yep.
Okay. So if I think I would like to see parklets as part of the 6-month period, because what I was envisioning is I want to know if they're sticking to certain seating limits with the parklets, if there's enough parking. And if we're doing it without the parklets, then I think, I don't know what I don't see a real benefit. I was envisioning it with the parklets.
Can we go to
I think
six-
we were saying we were
6
gonna,
months after the construction?
after the construction was built. So we will evaluate it with the full project, that includes the parklets. There's just this interim period in which that they'll have to get permits in a certain amount of time, do the valet parking. But the actual evaluation of the project will occur after, the entire project is completed.
Mhm. Yeah, okay.
So,
Stage.
that's the extent of, the notes that I had for the condition. So I appreciate you walking through that. It helps me a lot in trying to make sure we nail down, what the council's actions are.
Thank you. Okay. We're back to you Dick, on a motion for what? Walk through the conditions.
If I have to repeat this.
You don't.
It'd be all night.
We've just, worked through them all.
I just think everything that we've just gone through with Sean, to me sounds to me acceptable.
Okay.
So I would move that we accept it.
I would second that.
Let's do it, Jennifer.
I'm sorry, can I ask, are we voting on the entire project or
Yes.
this is?
It was reviewed by Sage.
So motion to approve what's in the packet with the suggestions and recommendations that council just made.
And for parking, which would allow parking, the beginning of the parking?
Yes.
Okay.
And I apologize, just one last, did we say 6 months or 12 months for the review after it's constructed?
We said 6 months.
Thank you.
Sorry, there would be a permanent mechanism in the CUP that would allow parties to take a look at it every 12 months.
Okay, so annual review.
Yes.
You waiting for me? No.
Okay, Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Gold. Okay, Councilmember Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Domkowski.
Yes.
That's working for the resident.
Pardon me? Yeah. Okay.
Made the residents very angry. After the people that are gonna have to put up with this crap.
All right. Moving on, sir. Oh, yes, A2. The rezoning of seats.
Take a 2-minute break.
We just do A2 and then do that. A2 is simply moving from rural residential to commercial. They're completely tied together. Parcel.
See, problem.
You want to make the motion?
I'll make the motion. So we'll make a motion to introduce and first reading of an ordinance amending the zoning map designation for APN 072-162-350 from rural residential to community commercial.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Alberish,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Gold, Councilmember Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Domkowski.
Yes. We're going to take a recess for 5 minutes to stretch our legs. We'll be back at 10:40 to do the final item for the night.
We also are counting one of those 4 ADUs as what's allowed for junior ADUs. So on those lots that are 2 acres or larger, it would allow for 2 accessory dwelling units that may be detached from the main dwelling. It also allows for a 4th unit if it's at least one of the units overall is attached to the main residence, and then the junior ADU. So the junior ADU by its nature would be part of the main residence. And so also HCD wanted that same application placed on lots in the SR district that are at least an acre in size. And so we provided the same allowances for the SR district for over 1 acre. And then we clarified that when you're between 1 and 2 acres in the other districts, that you're still, the maximum is 3, because today you're already allowed 2 plus the JADU, so that's just what's already allowed. Planning Commission went a step further, and it's not in the ordinance now, but we can change it. We provide an example on the following page in the staff report, that they just wanted to expand the 4 ADUs to lots in all of the districts that are over 1 acre or larger, as opposed to just allowing that in the SR district. They thought, they could allow it to all districts that are 1 acre or larger. So that's something that the council can consider. The ordinance also provides some exceptions now. So currently the municipal code does not allow developments on slopes in excess of 35%. The ordinance, the way it's written, allows for detached ADUs to go into slopes in excess of 35%, as well as utilities to serve those ADUs. So that could include septic systems, gas, electric, communication, but I think most notably septic systems for ADUs could be located in slopes in excess of 35%. So that is provided here. The Planning Commission was okay with that language, although they wanted to extend that exception to attached ADUs. So it means that, the specific part of the attached ADU can go into a steeper slope, but not the main residence itself. So that was a recommendation by the Planning Commission. Then as also part of the housing element programs, we just had to do some minor changes to our code for emergency shelters to be in compliance with state law. So those minor changes are outlined in the staff report. And lastly, there's a state law that starting in 2025, that jurisdictions have to allow for ADU vendors to submit through the town to get their ADU designs pre-approved. So these would be detached units, and essentially it's similar to like a building permit plan check without all the level of site-specific details. So size, heights, design, all of that would be something that the town ADU vendor could apply for review. The building department, the planning department, and I've also touched base with the fire district, they may want to review it, would review these plans, and should they meet all of our local requirements for height, size, that's more the zoning part of it, and then all the building code necessary for just the structure itself, any fire codes that may be necessary for just the structure itself, those could be approved, and then they're posted on the town's website with the contact information of those vendors. And people could go onto those, talk to those vendors, do their own contract with those vendors, and then create site-specific plans with the idea that knowing that design in terms of height, size, structural, will already meet the town's rules. So helps to expedite the process or even remove some uncertainty should any resident want to utilize one of those vendors. So the town just has to allow for this process to be in place. If no one submits for pre-approval, there would just be nothing. But if there's anything submitted for pre-approval and it does get approved, then the residents would have access to that information. So that concludes my presentation.
Questions for Sage? Son, anything?
Is there was there any thought into expanding beyond the 2 acre size? Like if there's a larger plot size, any reason not to?
No, it's a very good question. No, the town can allow more, and could allow, you know, more ADUs on lots of a larger size. I think what we were trying to focus on here is we have these very specific requirements in the housing element. They're to be completed by the end of the year. So we wanted to make sure that we at least got the minimum in here. But we are continually analyzing our ADU standards for all types of issues. And even to allow more ADUs on larger sites, I think is worth exploring further as well. If, for example, we're coming to Planning Commission next week to talk more about allowing for barns to be converted to ADUs, maybe more than one ADU. And so with the main focus tonight really being on let's implement what the housing program asked us to do, while we still have this commitment to continue looking at expanding different ways to get more ADUs and be more flexible for ADUs.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Quick questions. So take a parcel that's 2 acres. You could put 4 ADUs on them. You talked about combinations of junior, detached, not detached. What's the maximum number of detached?
So the maximum
Minimum
number,
and well, I guess the minimum would be 0.
yes, yeah. The maximum number of detached, the way it's written right now, is 2.
The 2, a junior and an attached.
Correct. And so we wanted to
Couldn't have 4 4 detached.
you could do that. We just wanted to make sure that we captured and what we kind of brought to the council as floating these ideas when we discussed these programs.
Okay,
So-
I may have heard you wrong. So on a 2 acre parcel, could you have 4 detached ADUs?
Not the way the code is written. Only 2
2,
detached,
1 attached?
1 attached and 1 junior.
Got it.
And then was that different from what the planning commission suggested?
The planning commission didn't change any of the configuration of the 4 ADUs. They just applied it to 1 acre or larger in all these districts as opposed to 2 acres and larger.
Wasn't this a requirement that came down to us from HCD?
That's correct. And we're structuring it in a way that might be a little bit more digestible. And again, you know, maybe being a little conservative on our initial approach, you know, as we continue to realize maybe we should just be allowing 3 detached, you know, it's something we definitely want to continue to monitor, and we could explore further down the road.
Yes, sir.
Oh, one other quick question, please. So on the prefab ADUs, so the way this is going to work is on our own website, we're going to say, this vendor has these and these are approved.
There's going to be a lot of caveats on the website, you know, and the law allows for that. You know, we're not endorsing these vendors in any way, and they're not necessarily prefab, but just the design is pre-approved, and so they could come in with like a quote unquote stick-built building and have that. But it could also be a prefab or manufactured.
But essentially, they're trying to buy this and drop it on their property. and
Yes,
It's ready.
yes, and
That's
that
state
it
law.
will, you know, it gets trickier if people are on hillside lots. They may not be able to
Yeah.
slam that unit in there.
Got it, sir. Dan, anything else? Nick, anything else? Okay, why don't we just close it down and open up public comment? David? After 10:30, we go to first names on a first name basis.
Sure. How do you know I wanted to speak, Steve? Dave Middleman, member of the ASRB, speaking as a private citizen. I think we should pass this. We promised we would pass it, and otherwise we won't have a compliant housing element. Although, when you open the book on something and then you close the book on something, opening the book again on that same subject rarely happens. And so there's 3 things in this ordinance that we should look at. The first is, to your point, the compository of the ADUs on the site. Right now, on a large site, you can have 2 detached ADUs. That fits with the design guidelines, in my opinion. Our design guidelines are meant to have rural feel, small structures, throughout a large parcel. If you have a large parcel, why force the property owner to add mass to their main residence to get more ADUs? It seems antithetical to me. Living on the hill, I find it interesting that if I live just a little bit more over the hill, I could build a 50% slope. But I can't here. And we're talking about adding an allowance to build up to 50% slope for septics for ADUs, for the corner of ADUs, for the corner of the ADU that's attached to the primary residence, but not the primary residence itself. Why differentiate between an ADU and the primary residence? A lot of those lots on the Western Hills aren't developed because of slope. But you go a little bit outside of Woodside, there's plenty of housing solutions that are on the hillside. I didn't think about this till tonight with prefab ADUs. That's actually a challenge on the slope of getting a truck up 84 with an ADU that's prefab. Won't fit. Can't actually fit it on the highway. I found that out 6 months ago. And so, tight turns. Something we might want to consider is in addition to those prefab ADUs that are really awesome is maybe, what's the word? Objective design standards around ADUs, so it can be built with materials in a pre-approved way. Is you can get materials up the hill, but not necessarily a container. It won't, we would have had to go 92 to Skyline down. And the only way to get in Skyward Acres would have been to use the gate, which is expressly not allowed.
Thank you.
I don't know why I'm hitting the mic.
All good. Thank you, Dave. Steve.
Hey, Steve Lubin again. I really like this idea of allowing more ADUs way more than I like the idea of building larger projects. And I hope we can work with the state to make it work to provide our housing. I think, you know, we blew it when we skipped over the missing middle solution earlier on in the housing element. But I think the thing that's kind of missing here is the locations. I think, you know, these things should be that when we increase density, it should be close to town where we're not, you know, causing a lot more traffic. You know, traditionally, you know, up before the Second World War, a lot of housing was provided in boarding houses and fourplexes and sixplexes and cottages that were built incrementally by people who lived in the neighborhood and fit in much better. And I think we should try to do that, but we should try to do it close to town where we're not creating so much traffic, where we have the potential of them being served by the bus line that comes every 20 minutes all weekday to Kenyatta College and goes out 280 and down Woodside Road. If it went out the back in Kenyatta Road, we could have 20-minute bus service each direction in downtown Woodside. And that's the sort of thing we should be looking at to fix traffic. And you know, the location's important and for safety and lots of other reasons. I think the West Hills, sorry Dave, but the Western Hills is really not the right place to increase our densities. It's close to transportation and where people can walk or roll to town.
Yes, I think we have to do it. I think we need to do it. I would like to, I don't know if there's any way to say, you know, we set something in the works to where we bring up the topic of more, you know, larger plot sizes, you know, and the issues raised by David, of, separating those out. And so maybe further looking at the rules and seeing what else we could do to work with them beyond this. But for this, I think it makes sense just to pass it as it is tonight.
Supportive. No?
Thank you. This, one of these issues that was brought up about who cares if the units are attached or detached? I mean, do we care that one of them is detached, or would you be okay just dropping that issue?
I would be happy to drop the issue of.
Yeah, okay.
I understand the reason we're doing it. It's just a starting point and we can modify it.
Yeah,
So it's not a big deal either way.
okay. Then? Oh, yes, you can.
Yeah, I'm supportive of what's been proposed in the packet. And I'm also supportive of the recommendations made by the Planning Commission. So that's where I'm coming out on this one.
I'm supportive of the packet, and also like the idea of certainly exploring, putting it on all larger sizes beyond 2 acres.
So, are we giving direction? That's not what we're doing here tonight.
This would be introducing an ordinance.
Yeah, so if we want to introduce, but what if we want to make any changes, we need to make those changes, to David's point, be helpful to make those now, like we don't care about attached or detached.
Correct, yes.
Right.
What I heard is that you just allow for all flexibility. We'd still have the 1J ADU.
Yeah.
But for the other 3,
They
could be
outside.
attached or detached.
Right.
We would just, we can easily clarify that.
And there was a secondary issue about it was only in certain districts versus a 2-acre level.
Right, so then so what I heard,
To Steve's
Councilmember
point.
Wall noted that, that planning commission changes, the planning commission recommended change would just now allow it for all properties that are 1 acre or larger, not just the 1 acre or larger in the SR district. So it would.
But right now, we're at 2 acres.
Right, 2 acres or larger in all our districts except SR, where SR is 1 acre or larger, and that was baked in through the HCD requirement.
Well, I'm not advocating for 1 acre, but
So right now it's 1 acre or larger, get 4 in SR, and all other districts 2 acre or
it's at
larger.
1 acre. Oh. Well, I guess I'm just asking, would we be okay just dropping this issue of having to have one of these things attached to structure?
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are all right with
We got that.
Okay.
And then, sorry, I just want to make sure, is everybody also fine with the recommendations made by the Planning Commission?
Yes.
So it's what's shown here in table L1. So basically, the commission recommended a modification to table L1 to allow all properties within all residential zoning districts that are at least 1 acre be allowed a main residence and 4 additional units.
And then the other recommendation was also to allow attached ADUs in slopes in excess of 35% along with their utilities.
attached.
Yes, because we had it just for detached before. And so it's unique, but I can envision, a place where there is an attached ADU and the main house is not
That's on
slopes where the attached goes into the steeper slope, or when you're expanding your septic system for an attached ADU that may not be in a 35% slope, but the septic system then can be for that attached ADU.
Okay.
Can
You've
I
sat
ma-
this long, Thalia. We'll just
Can I
reopen
just make
public.
one
Of course, of
recommendation
course.
that we don't specify a particular manufacturer on the website? That we, I don't know how you would phrase it, but what I'm concerned about is that people are going to say, oh yeah, let's pick XYZ because I know the town's going to approve that. And so we're going to get these cookie cutter structures around town. Oh, I know if I go to ABC, they're not going to approve it. So I'm going to go to XYZ because that's on the town's website. I caution you because if we're going to have manufactured housing in town, which we've never allowed prior to this, we need to be careful how you suggest what can be done. So
That, say, do you have a response?
Yeah, I do. So just to clarify a couple of things. So manufactured housing, main houses, ADUs have always been allowed. They have to be allowed by state law. This is just something constructed off-site instead of on-site. Yet they still go through all our same processes. And then also to clarify the comment made earlier that this is not just for prefab or manufactured housing. This is for any type of ADU, whether it's a prefab or stick builds is the kind of terminology used. And it's just that jurisdictions have to allow a process in which vendors want to get pre-approved. And so if they get those pre-approvals, meaning they meet our size, height requirements, they meet our building codes, fire codes, that the building gets approved, and now they have to come back in. There's a lot of caveats, again, that are going to be built into this, with site-specific information that's going to deal with grading, drainage, septic suitability, all of those things, utilities, all of those things are going to have to be. So it's just showing essentially a design, a layout, and there's really strict limitation. They can't really change anything. So it's not that, oh, the town approved this, but I want to make this change. That's not the idea of the state law. The state law is very clear that cities do not have to allow changes. So it's just a process in which an ADU vendor, and we use vendor, I mean, it could be an architect, a manufacturing company, it could be a designer, so we just use that kind of generic term. And so it's just to comply with state law that we have to allow this process. And yes, if it is on our website, it will be that design, size, shape, and kind of 3D envelope will be approved. They can just now apply that to their specific site.
But we don't use somebody on an exclusionary basis. Anybody can apply.
Oh, yeah, so, right, so we don't, some cities have decided to go out like buy plans and things like that. I don't think we're at that level of need at all.
Right.
And so, so yes, it would be up to an architect, an ADU vendor. It's almost like applying for a building permit just without the site specific.
Where we are these days. Okay.
So we dealt with the detached and attached.
Yeah, we
We're clear
detached
on
and
that.
detached and the planning commission.
And both planning commission recommendations in terms of allowing all 1 acre or larger, and then allowing the attached and the steep slopes. Got it. With that, so if you want to introduce the ordinance.
Yeah.
Need a motion?
Well, yeah, we need to introduce the ordinance. Can I give it to you? Can I give it to you, Jen?
Yeah.
And then you can have your second.
All right, so making a motion to introduce an ordinance to amend Municipal Code Chapter 153, zoning, implementing housing element programs H1.3A, allowing additional ADUs on larger properties, H1.3B, removing barriers to construction of ADUs and JADUs, and H4.3A, an update to the definition of emergency shelters pursuant to State Government Code Section 65583A4.
With the adjustments.
The adjustments proposed by the Planning Commission.
I'll second that.
And removing the requirement for one to be attached.
Correct.
Said I'll second it.
Councilmember Abarish,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Gold, Councilmember Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Domikowski.
Yes. Okay, mayor and council communications. Anyone have anything you want to throw into the, yes, sir.
Okay, January 16th, 2025, we're going to have a workshop here for seniors to tell them how you avoid falling, hurting yourself.
You?
We haven't sent anything out yet. Starts to go out tomorrow.
Anything else? Okay, sorry, Steve, I know you're here and it's late, so you wanted to say something else, just to
Yeah.
wrap us up?
I thought there was a end of meeting public communications as
Oh,
well.
there is, yeah, okay.
I was just wondering if I could get an update on the RFP for the town center plan and what consultants have been invited and that sort of thing.
So it's out. We targeted a handful of We targeted a handful to make sure they got it. It's been widely distributed, so we've heard. I don't think we sent them directly. But we've got inquiries also. Yeah, so we've gotten inquiries from folks that we didn't target. At this point, we've got 2 firms that have indicated that they will be submitting a proposal. Off the top of my head. One is Aaron, former director at Redwood City. This firm. No? You know what I'm talking about.
Is-
Lisa Wise Consulting also wrote back right away and said they would be.
Is it possible to share this information, the distribution and the actual RFP?
Yeah, they're on.
And the responses?
Well, the responses, at this point, they're just
Their interest.
indicating
That-
interest.
yeah,
Yeah,
if
but
I-
the RFP is online.
Excuse me?
It's online.
Okay, I'll look then. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think with that, oh, go ahead, Paul.
Oh, yes. So Friday, we will have an agendized item for the council to meet with the executive recruiter. This is here, yep, in this room. Closed session, and I needed to actually check with you about what to put on the agenda, but 3:15, yep, 3:15. Yep, and this is to finalize their materials with which they will go knocking on doors. For the new me. Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
Who's attending?
I'll be there.
I got you 4.
You can, we only need 3 of us, yeah. Yeah, all right. Okay, and I think with that, thank you all for your time and in service, and have a lovely night.